A new challenger. Deep in the shadowed wilderness of Eastern Europe, hidden beneath layers of misdirection and denial, the Russian black site pulsed with cold efficiency. It was more fortress than facility, cloaked in satellite dead zones, guarded by black-budget ghosts, and sealed from the world by silence and snow. Inside a sterile conference room dimly lit by overhead projectors, the highest minds behind Project Spectre gathered. Around the table sat elite cyber warfare tacticians, military strategists, and deep state operatives, representatives not only of Russia, but of an uneasy transnational alliance forged in secrecy. On the central screen, footage of Solomon Kane's rampage through Berlin played. His movements were primal yet precise, savage yet strategic. He dismantled entire strike teams with fluid brutality. Cigarette smoke curled upward as a Russian colonel exhaled, eyes locked on the screen. Kane is a problem, he growled. Unpredictable. Smart. Adaptive. He doesn't just fight, he hunts. A Chinese intelligence official leaned back with a faint smile. Then it's fortunate we've already developed a countermeasure. The lights dimmed further. A second screen came to life. File Ghost. A Russian operative spoke with confidence that bordered on arrogance. Solomon Kane is a relic. Impressive, yes, but obsolete. What we've built is evolution. Meet Ghost. The footage began. A figure danced through a battlefield with terrifying precision. Dozens of soldiers fell in seconds. Each movement efficient, surgical. No hesitation. No wasted motion. Ghost was the blade to Kane's hammer. He moved like a shadow, killed like a machine, and vanished like smoke. The Chinese official's eyes gleamed. Kane has had his moment. Let's see how long he lasts against tomorrow's war. A dangerous mission. Miles away from the conspiracies of the East, a storm was brewing. In a dim rebel briefing room, lit only by flickering monitors and filtered moonlight, Jamie Lancaster stood before her strike team. Behind her, a schematic of a fortified cyber warfare hub glowed red with urgency. This is their central nervous system, she said. From here, Spectre controls disinformation campaigns, manipulates global markets, and executes digital sabotage. Taking this facility, I will paralyze them. Solomon Kane, arms crossed, studied the map. His expression was unreadable. Resistance. Jamie didn't hesitate. Heavy, automated defenses, PMC units, and possibly worse. Vikram Rathore stepped forward. Our intel suggests they've brought in someone tailored for you. Kane raised an eyebrow. Tailored? Vikram nodded. A counter unit. Engineered. Surgical. Kane smiled just a little. Good. I was getting bored. The infiltration begins. The mission began under a shroud of fog and forest. Kane's team moved like phantoms through the trees, aided by adaptive camouflage and cutting-edge stealth gear. They neutralized drones and automated turrets with quiet, calculated strikes. Each meter was earned in silence. And yet, Kane felt it. Wrong. Too smooth. Too quiet. The calm before kill. The arrival of Ghost. The silence shattered. Solomon Kane. The voice came over the comms, calm, composed, almost amused. I hope you come. The team froze. Kane's eyes narrowed. Identify yourself. A chuckle. Low. Cold. They call me Ghost. You? You're just the warm-up. Gunfire erupted. Not chaotic. Not wild. Methodical. Shadows moved where none should. Operatives vanished one by one, dropped by non-lethal but devastating strikes. This wasn't a firefight. It was a hunt. Solomon versus Ghost. Kane activated his combat protocol, his instincts coiled like a spring. Gunfire flickered through the dark. Then, a blur. A blade. He ducked just in time as steel sliced past his neck. He countered with an elbow strike. Too slow. Ghost had already disappeared. You're fast, Kane muttered. Faster than you, came the reply. Ghost struck again, launching Kane into a steel crate. Pain lanced through his ribs. Kane rolled, narrowly avoiding the follow-up strike. Ghost was faster, more precise, more refined, but Kane grinned through the pain. Finally, a challenge. They collided, two titans of death. Fist met blade, instinct met calculation. Every strike taught Kane more. Ghost was quick, but predictable. Kane had fought monsters, assassins, soldiers. He adapted, and Ghost felt it. A costly escape. The fight reached its crescendo, neither giving an inch. Then, Jamie's voice through Kane's earpiece. Virus deployed. The hub is crashing. Ghost paused, blade inches from Kane's throat. Our game ends here for now. And like vapor, he vanished. Explosions ripped through the compound. Kane regrouped with his team and fled as fire and data burned behind them. But as he disappeared into the forest, Kane looked back at the war just beginning. He'd fought enemies before, but Ghost was something else. Not just a rival, a reckoning. Ghost's report. High above the burning ruin of the facility, Ghost stood silently atop a ridge. Fires blazed in the valley below, casting orange across his visor. His breathing was steady, measured. He opened a secure channel. Report, came the voice on the other end. The facility is gone, Ghost replied. The virus exceeded projections. Cybernetics collapsed in under 3 minutes. A pause, and Solomon Kane? Ghost's lips curled faintly beneath the mask. Adaptable, dangerous, but not beyond control. Silence. Then, a voice from the dark. Next time, kill him. Ghost ended the call. He turned from the flames. Next time, there will be no escape. Next time, Solomon Kane dies. A chilling message. In the heart of a secure Warsaw bunker, low red lighting cast long shadows across rows of humming monitors. Satellite feeds flickered on giant screens. Live intel scrolled across encrypted interfaces. Jamie Lancaster, standing tensely before the central display, felt her pulse spike. Beside her, Solomon Kane watched in silence, his posture calm, his eyes anything but. Vikram Rathore, arms crossed, studied the encrypted message that had just breached their comms. The screen sputtered, then stabilized. A figure emerged, draped in black tactical gear, face obscured by a smooth, expressionless mask with a faint HUD glow. Ghost filled the screen. His voice cut through the room like a scalpel, chilling, deliberate, and mocking. Solomon Kane, the rogue predator of the battlefield. I expected more, but today you were prey, and you barely survived. Solomon's jaw flexed. Jamie's fists clenched. You still believe this is a war of honor, of tactics, of ideals. But war has evolved. It's no longer just fought with bullets. The video feed shifted. Multiple live surveillance feeds replaced Ghost's image. Jamie's breath caught in her throat. Her father, Admiral David Lancaster, was leaving his Washington home, flanked by a disguised security agent. Another feed showed her mother, Beth, mid-lecture at university, unaware of the camera trained on her from across the hall. A third feed zoomed in on Sophia, Jamie's aunt, reading quietly inside her apartment. Ghost's voice remained steady, eerily devoid of emotion. You can fight all you want. It won't matter. We're always watching. The screen flickered again, this time Carlos. Beaten, bloody, bound to a chair. A single overhead bulb cast a sickly light across his bruised face. His head hung low. Solomon's eyes darkened. Do you feel it now, Kane? That helplessness? That rage? If this is your peak, then you're just a name waiting to be forgotten. The screen went black. Silence. For a moment, no one moved. Then Solomon stepped away from the screen, voice low and decisive. We're going after Carlos. Jamie, rattled but resolute, took a breath. And my family. Vikram was already dialing. I'll handle it. Your father needs to be notified. Protection protocols go live now. Solomon turned, already shifting into mission mode. No loose ends. I'll handle insertion. Jamie, take point on technical. Disable their surveillance grid. Vikram interjected. You'll need someone watching her back. If you don't trust your men, bring me. It's been a while since my last field op, but I've kept my edge. Solomon cracked a rare smile. Glad to have you, Colonel. Operation Shadow Rescue. Target, abandoned Soviet-era industrial complex, outskirts of Bratislava, Slovakia. Now a covert Spectre Black site. In the hold of a low-altitude stealth transport, Solomon addressed the team. We go in silent. Exfil fast. No prisoners. No delays. We extract Carlos, alive. Ghost or not, we end this. Jamie locked her armor in place. And if Ghost shows, Solomon loaded his rifle. Then I finished what he started. The infiltration. The facility loomed ahead, dark, rusted, and monstrous. Tall fences hummed with energy. Spotlights swept lazily over shattered concrete. Through the trees, the team moved like shadows. Vikram worked his magic, feeding backdoor commands into the drone network. Blind window, 2 minutes. Move now. They scaled the eastern wall, silent and fluid. A sentry dropped. No sound, no cry. Another crumpled beneath Jamie's swift takedown. Solomon led the way across the rooftop, each step echoing with lethal intent. Security's tight, Jamie whispered. They're expecting us, Solomon replied. Breaking in. At the core of the compound, Carlos sat restrained inside a reinforced cell, guarded by elite Spectre operatives. Solomon gave a nod. The first shot whispered. A guard dropped. Jamie followed with a silent strike, clean, surgical. Vikram's blade flickered in the dark. Another target gone. They reached the door. No more time. Solomon planted a shaped charge. Boom. The blast rocked the facility. Alarms screamed. Red lights bayed the halls. Inside, Carlos blinked, dazed. Took you long enough. Jamie rushed forward, cutting his bonds. You're safe. Let's go. Carlos coughed, blood in his throat. They knew you were coming. Solomon froze. A trap. Ghost ambush. Gunfire erupted from the catwalks above. Ghost stood at the center, calm amid chaos. Predictable. Solomon shoved Carlos toward Jamie. Evac. Now. A sniper round cracked. Jamie narrowly dodged. Vikram lobbed a flashbang. Light exploded in every direction. Solomon's gaze met Ghost's. No words were needed. Ghost nodded. Next time, Kane. Then he vanished, into smoke, into myth. The escape. The compound crumbled under its own chaos. Explosions roared behind them. Jamie shielded Carlos, Vikram disabling security gates ahead. Solomon stayed behind, covering their retreat with blistering gunfire. The team reached the evac zone just as their chopper descended through smoke and sparks. As they lifted off, the flames below lit Solomon's face. Ghost had escaped, but so had Carlos. Epilogue. The warning. Back in the safety of the Warsaw base, Carlos sat on the infirmary cot, sipping water, his face marked by bruises, but his mind sharp. They weren't interrogating me for intel. They were dissecting you, Solomon. Your tactics, your instincts. They weren't breaking me. They were building a profile of you. Jamie leaned in, alarmed. Why? Carlos looked up, voice cold. They're preparing for something bigger. Silence. Solomon's eyes narrowed. Then we make damn sure they don't get the chance.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
Memory of the battle. The dim glow of the overhead lights cast long shadows across the secure bunker. Solomon Kane sat alone in the armory, his combat vest still on, the weight of the past mission pressing down on him like a phantom grip. The faint hum of distant conversation in the base barely registered. His mind was elsewhere. He closed his eyes, exhaling sharply. The memories flooded back. The roar of gunfire, the heat of the explosions, and the unrelenting presence of Ghost, a shadow that refused to be outmaneuvered. It hadn't been just a fight. It had been a test. Every strike, every shot, every move, Ghost had been learning, adapting, calculating. Solomon's fists clenched. He could still feel the weight of his knife clashing against Ghost's blade, the near misses of his enemy's gunfire, the way the air had been ripped apart by their relentless exchange. And then, the explosions, the collapsing structure, the desperate escape. He opened his eyes, his breath steady but cold. Ghost hadn't just fought him. Ghost had studied him. And that realization sent a slow-burning fury through Solomon's veins. Flashback. The industrial complex burned behind them, casting an eerie glow against the cold night sky. The extraction team was moving fast, carrying Carlos through the escape route. Vikram and Jamie covered their flank, firing short, precise bursts at the remaining Spectre operatives, trying to box them in. But Solomon Kane wasn't running. He turned back toward the collapsing building. Because Ghost was still inside. The comms crackled. "Solomon, we need to go." Jamie's voice was urgent, but she knew him too well. He didn't reply. Instead, he tightened his grip on his rifle and disappeared into the smoke, face to face with death. Inside the ruined complex, the flames twisted through the hallways like serpents, licking at the steel supports. Explosions rocked the foundation, sending showers of concrete and metal cascading from above. And in the center of it all, standing in the flickering light of a crumbling corridor, was Ghost. He stood with his back to a cracked support beam, his sniper rifle discarded, replaced by a combat knife in one hand and a silenced pistol in the other. "You always have to be the hero," Ghost taunted, his voice calm even through the chaos. "You should have left while you had the chance." Solomon exhaled, rolling his shoulders, stepping forward like a predator, sizing up his prey. "Not until I finish this." Without another word, Ghost moved. He lunged, his knife flashing towards Solomon's ribs in a lethal arc. Solomon barely sidestepped, feeling the air shift as the blade sliced past. He countered with a brutal elbow strike, but Ghost was already twisting away, snapping his silenced pistol up. Bang! Solomon jerked his head at the last second, the bullet grazing past his cheek instead of piercing his skull. Too close. He grabbed Ghost's wrist, twisting it sharply. Ghost let go of the gun, but in the same motion, he brought his knife up towards Solomon's throat. Solomon blocked, catching the knife between his forearm and bicep, but Ghost was fast. He slammed a knee into Solomon's ribs, making him stagger. Ghost was good. No, he was better than good. Inferno closing in. Overhead, the ceiling groaned as the structural supports gave way. The whole building was coming down. Ghost pivoted, pressing the attack. He lashed out with a precise, calculated series of slashes and thrusts, forcing Solomon backward toward the roaring flames. Solomon deflected the blows, feeling the heat against his back. Time was running out. He needed to end this now. Ghost feinted left, then spun right, aiming for Solomon's kidney. But this time, Solomon was ready. He caught Ghost's wrist mid-strike, twisted it violently, and sent the knife clattering away. Ghost barely had time to react before Solomon drove a brutal headbutt into his face. The masked operative stumbled back, dazed for the first time. Solomon didn't hesitate. He grabbed Ghost by the vest and slammed him through a half-broken doorway. Ghost hit the floor hard, but even as he landed, he reached for another concealed weapon. Solomon kicked the pistol out of his grip. "Enough." Ghost coughed, slowly pushing himself up. His visor was cracked, revealing a single eye beneath the shattered glass. A human eye. For the first time, Solomon saw not just the assassin, but the man underneath. "Who are you?" Solomon demanded. Ghost's breathing was ragged, but he still chuckled. "You think that matters?" A distant explosion rocked the building. Flames erupted along the hallway, racing toward them. It was over. Ghost exhaled slowly. Then he smiled, not in defeat, but in triumph. "You're out of time." Solomon's eyes flicked upward. A small, blinking detonator light was embedded in the collapsing ceiling. The whole place was rigged to blow. A desperate escape. Solomon moved on instinct. He grabbed Ghost and hurled him backward. The masked assassin hit the ground hard, skidding across the floor. A fireball erupted where he had just stood, the explosion swallowing the hallway in a blinding inferno. No sign of Ghost. But Solomon had no time to check. He turned and sprinted through the collapsing corridor as the detonations ripped the building apart. Boom! Concrete shattered. Steel buckled. The world became fire and debris. Solomon barely made it to the eastern exit, hurling himself through a shattered window a split second before the entire facility collapsed in on itself. Extraction. Jamie and Vikram were already in the evac transport helicopter, waiting. Carlo sat beside them, weak but alive. Jamie spotted Solomon first. "There he is. Go, go, go." The transport helicopter side door was already open. Solomon ran, his boots pounding against the dirt as the shockwave from the final explosion sent a wall of smoke and fire rolling after him. He leaped, grabbing the outstretched hand of Vikram. As the transport helicopter pulled up, the moment he was aboard, the craft banked hard, racing away from the inferno below. Jamie helped Solomon to his feet. "You look like hell." Solomon exhaled sharply, wiping soot and blood from his face. "I feel worse." Vikram crossed his arms. "Did you get him?" Solomon stared out the open door. The ruined facility was now nothing but a smoldering crater. Ghost was nowhere in sight. After a long moment, Solomon muttered, "No, but this isn't over." Epilogue: a shadow in the smoke. Several miles away, hidden in the thick forests of Slovakia, a lone figure staggered through the trees. His black tactical suit was scorched, his movements unsteady. Ghost reached up, unclasping what remained of his broken helmet. With a sharp pull, he removed the cracked visor, tossing it to the dirt. For the first time in years, he stood unmasked under the pale moonlight. A low chuckle rumbled from his chest as he wiped the blood from his split lip. Solomon Kane had pushed him to his limit. Good, because next time he would return the favor. Ghost stepped forward, disappearing into the night. The hunt was far from over. Aftermath of the mission. The safe house was buried deep in the Slovakian mountains, concealed beneath layers of rock, reinforced steel, and encrypted security systems. To the outside world, it was nothing more than an abandoned military outpost. To Solomon Kane and his team, it was the only place where they could regroup, patch their wounds, and plan their next move. Inside, the dim fluorescent lighting cast a sterile glow over the room. The atmosphere was thick with tension, exhaustion, and something else, the weight of what they had just survived. Carlos lay on a reinforced medical bed in the center of the room, for lines running into his arm. His condition was stable, but the trauma he had endured was still evident in his sunken eyes and trembling hands. The mission had nearly broken him, and even though he was safe, his mind was still trapped in the hell they had pulled him from. Jamie stood beside him, her arms crossed, eyes scanning the monitors that displayed his vitals. Vikram leaned against the wall, checking his rifle for the 5th time in the past hour. No one spoke. Then Solomon entered. His uniform was still caked with soot and dried blood, his knuckles bruised from the fight with Ghost. His face was a mask of control, but the intensity in his eyes told a different story. He had barely spoken since they had made it back. Jamie finally broke the silence. "You need rest, Kane." Solomon shook his head. "No time." Vikram sighed, setting his rifle down. "We did our job. We got Carlos out. Now we let command take it from here." "You don't get it," Solomon snapped, his voice edged with frustration. "This wasn't just a rescue mission. We just walked into something bigger than any of us." Jamie narrowed her eyes. "You mean Ghost?" Solomon nodded, jaw tightening. "He wasn't just stalling. He was testing me, studying me." He exhaled sharply. He knew the mission was compromised, and yet he stayed behind. Why? The room fell into silence. Carlos stirred slightly, his voice hoarse as he spoke for the first time. "They're planning something." Everyone turned to him. Jamie took a step closer. "Carlos, what do you mean?" He swallowed hard, his throat dry. "The Spectres, they're not just after intelligence or sabotage. They're positioning themselves for something bigger. I overheard their operatives talking before they moved me." Solomon's gaze darkened. "What did they say?" Carlos hesitated, his voice barely above a whisper. "They called it the Cataclysm Protocol, unraveling the mystery." The war table in the safe house's strategy room flickered to life as Jamie pulled up a series of encrypted files, decrypted using the intel Carlos had provided. The documents were fragmented, but the pieces were starting to form a disturbing picture. Vikram frowned, scrolling through the data. "These aren't just routine operations. They're hitting high-value targets, government agencies, corporate facilities, military installations." Jamie's fingers danced over the controls, pulling up a red-marked file. "Here, this is the key. The Spectres have been acquiring classified materials related to orbital weapons platforms and next-gen AI warfare systems." Solomon's eyes locked onto the file name. Project Revenant. Carlos tensed. "That's what they were after. That's what they tortured me for." A cold silence followed. Jamie exhaled. Project Revenant was scrapped years ago. A prototype AI warfare system designed to take control of battlefield operations with zero human oversight. The risk was too high, so it was shut down before it was ever deployed. Vikram shook his head. Apparently, not shut down enough. Solomon clenched his jaw. If the Spectres have access to any part of that system, they could launch precision strikes, take over defense networks, and cripple entire nations before anyone even knew what hit them. Jamie ran a hand through her hair. And now they have all the missing pieces. Carlos shook his head weakly. Not yet. There's one last piece they're missing. Everyone turned to him again. He took a slow breath. There's a secure vault. One last copy of Revenant's core protocols. It's locked inside a NATO black site in Geneva. Solomon's mind was already racing. Then that's where they'll go next. Jamie exhaled sharply. And if they get their hands on it, we're looking at a global nightmare. The hunt begins. The team had no time to waste. Within an hour, they had geared up, preparing for what would be their most dangerous mission yet. Solomon adjusted the straps on his combat vest, his mind already focused on the battle ahead. Vikram stood beside him, locking a fresh magazine into his rifle. You really think we can beat them to Geneva? Solomon's expression was grim. We have to. Jamie approached, securing her sidearm. We should assume they'll already have operatives on the ground. We'll need to be ghosts. She smirked slightly. No pun intended. Carlos, still weak but determined, forced himself to sit up. I'm coming with you. Jamie frowned. You're still recovering. Carlos shook his head. This isn't just about survival. This is about stopping them. I won't sit this one out. Solomon met his gaze for a long moment before nodding. All right, but you stay close. As they moved toward the exit, Vikram let out a low chuckle. You know, I was hoping for a break after that last mission. Can't I just let you young ones save the day? Jamie smirked. Maybe after we save the world. I still believe the Colonel Vikram's old bones have a lot of fight left in them. Vikram laughed. My cousin was right about you. I may be getting old, but believe me that in my youth, I have fought like a tiger in the Kargil War back in 1999, and even after many decades now, I can still fight another war like that. Amid everyone banter and teasing to ease their mounting tension from the imminent battle, Solomon led the way as they stepped into the darkness, their next battlefield already waiting for them. The hunt was on. Epilogue. In the shadows. Somewhere far away, in a hidden facility beneath the Swiss Alps, a lone figure stood before a massive digital display. Streams of classified data flowed across the screen. A countdown timer was embedded in the top corner. A faint smile curled beneath a fractured visor. Ghost had survived, and he was already ahead of them. The Cataclysm Protocol was about to begin. Arrival in the war zone. The cold Geneva night was shattered by the distant echoes of helicopters and the low hum of surveillance drones cutting through the sky. The NATO Black Site, a heavily fortified underground facility, was hidden beneath a corporate research building. To the untrained eye, it was just another finance office in the heart of Switzerland. But beneath its glass and steel exterior, it housed something far more dangerous. Project Revenant's core protocols. Solomon Kane and his team had no time to waste. Their insertion had been smooth, parachuting in from stealth aircraft, landing on the outskirts of Geneva. But the moment their boots hit the ground, they knew they weren't the only ones hunting. From the vantage point of a nearby rooftop, Jamie adjusted her night vision scope. We're too late. Solomon followed her gaze. Convoys of black SUVs and armored vehicles rolled through the streets, flanked by armed mercenaries in cutting-edge gear. At least 2 attack helicopters hovered above the building, their searchlights sweeping the area. Autonomous combat drones patrolled the perimeter. The Spectres were already here. They brought an entire strike force, Vikram muttered, his voice grim. Looks like they want this badly. Carlos, still recovering from his ordeal but determined, gritted his teeth. We go in now, or we lose everything. Solomon nodded. No turning back. We fight. Breaking the perimeter. The team moved in fast and quiet, navigating through the alleys to avoid the main force. Jamie hacked into the Spectre's local network, feeding false data to their surveillance drones while disabling some cameras. Then the first shot was fired. Vikram dropped a guard on Overwatch with a suppressed sniper round. The enemy never saw it coming. Go, go, Solomon ordered. The team advanced, planting EMP charges along the fence. A synchronized detonation plunged a section of the compound into darkness. The Spectre's mercenaries reacted fast, but not fast enough. Carlos lobbed a grenade into the nearest patrol, the explosion sending 2 guards flying. Jamie cut down another group with precise burst fire from her suppressed rifle. Vikram provided overwatch, picking off targets before they could radio for help. Solomon engaged 2 mercenaries head-on, dodging a knife strike before driving his own blade into one of their ribs. He pivoted, disarming the second and snapping his neck in one fluid motion. The first layer of defenses had fallen, but the real battle was just beginning. The Spectres strike back. The blackout had alerted the Spectre's command. Within seconds, the sky lit up with tracer rounds and explosions. An enemy gunship, an armored Black Hawk variant, descended, its side gunners unloading minigun fire. "Get to cover!" Solomon shouted. The team dived behind a concrete barrier as bullets tore through the ground around them. Jamie pulled out a compact missile launcher, locking onto the helicopter. Whoosh! The missile streaked through the air, hitting the tail rotor. The gunship spiraled out of control, smashing into the side of the building in a fiery explosion. Vikram chuckled. That's one less problem. But the Spectres weren't done. Heavy reinforcements were rolling in, tanks and armored vehicles, deploying more troops. A squad of autonomous war drones hovered over the battlefield, firing precision shots at anything that moved. They brought tanks to Geneva. Carlos cursed. Solomon tapped his comms. "We need to hit their command center. Take out their officers, and the rest will fall apart." The only problem? It was in the most fortified section of the complex. Urban warfare. The streets became a war zone. Attack drones strafed the rooftops, forcing the team to move between cover. Jamie launched a cyber attack, overriding 2 enemy drones and turning them against their operators. The hijacked machines opened fire on a group of Spectres, cutting them down before they could react. Vikram signaled, "Tanks are moving in. We need an anti-armor solution. Fast." Carlos grinned and pulled out a thermobaric rocket launcher. "I got this." Boom! The first tank erupted into a fireball, its turret flipping through the air before slamming into a nearby building. Another tank responded, its cannon firing at their position. The shell obliterated an entire street corner, sending debris raining down. Solomon sprinted forward, ducking between burning wreckage. With precise aim, he lobbed a C4 charge onto the second tank's tracks. Detonation. The blast ripped through the metal plating, immobilizing the beast. Jamie followed up with a grenade, disabling its weapon system. They were cutting a path through the enemy. But the clock was ticking. The final push. Solomon led the charge toward the Spectre's command post, a heavily fortified bunker beneath the research building. Security turrets activated, unleashing a hailstorm of gunfire. Vikram grabbed a discarded riot shield, charging forward to absorb the initial barrage. Jamie and Carlos flanked, tossing smoke grenades to obscure their advance. Then the Spectre's elite soldiers emerged. Heavily armored and wielding advanced railgun rifles, they were nothing like the standard mercenaries. Solomon engaged the first, blocking a rifle but strike before slamming his knife into the soldier's visor. The second enemy lunged, only to be gunned down by Jamie's precise headshot. Vikram tackled another, wrestling for control of a combat knife before jamming it into the enemy's throat. Carlos planted an explosive on the final bunker door. Blowing it now. Boom. The reinforced steel buckled and collapsed. The team stormed in, cutting down the remaining defenders. Victory and a warning. Inside, Solomon found what they were looking for, a secure vault containing the last copy of Project Revenant's core AI. Jamie hacked the console, downloading the data while the rest of the team held the entrance. Carlos exhaled. "We did it." But Solomon wasn't convinced. Something felt wrong. Then, the main screen flickered to life. A distorted voice echoed through the room. "Well played, Kane. But you're too late." A live video feed appeared. Ghost, standing inside a hidden control center, far away, surrounded by Spectre operatives. Behind him, a countdown timer. 00:00:10. 00:00:09. Solomon's blood ran cold. The Cataclysm Protocol had already begun. A new land rises. Far from the chaos of Geneva, across the treacherous southern seas, a new land had emerged. An island torn away from the Antarctic continent, now claimed by the elves. Once part of the frozen wasteland, it had been reshaped by magic and now stood as a bastion of elven power, its towering fortresses gleaming under the eternal moonlight cast by their divine sorcery. Within the grand halls of an imposing elven citadel, torches flickered with a cold, silver glow. Two voices whispered within the chamber of an enchanted artifact, its ethereal runes pulsating with divine energy. "The divine artifact is working properly," said a commanding female voice, one that carried the discipline of night. A second voice, majestic and refined, like that of a royal, responded, "With this in place, humans will no longer be able to focus directly on us. Their gaze will be clouded, their attentions divided. We can proceed without interference." The first voice spoke once more, her tone laced with quiet confidence. "Humans should treasure their days, for their time in freedom is numbered." A world in chaos. The moment the countdown reached 0, the world changed. Across multiple continents, blackouts swept through major cities, crippling power grids and severing communication networks. Banks, airports, and emergency services were thrown into disarray as automated systems collapsed. In an instant, billions of people were plunged into darkness, their only connection to the outside world cut off. Project Revenant's core AI had been released. Inside the NATO black site in Geneva, Solomon Kane and his team stared at the monitors in horror. The room was eerily silent, save for the distant echoes of explosions and gunfire from outside. Jamie, still at the hack terminal, furiously typed commands, trying to contain the breach. "It's everywhere," she muttered. "Every major system, governments, military networks, satellites. Infected in seconds. This isn't just an attack. It's a takeover." Carlos slammed his fist against the wall. "We came here to stop this from happening. How the hell did he beat us to it?" Solomon took a deep breath, staring at the frozen screen. Ghost had planned this from the beginning. Vikram reloaded his rifle. "Forget stopping it. How do we survive it?" The fall of order. As the Cataclysm Protocol spread, nations fell into disarray. In Washington, D.C., the Pentagon went into emergency lockdown as its digital defenses were overwhelmed. Military commanders barked orders, but the chain of command was fractured, communication cut off from deployed forces worldwide. In Moscow, Russian intelligence agencies fought desperately to isolate their networks, but the AI was too fast. Missile defense systems, power stations, and transportation hubs blinked offline one by one. In Beijing, China's central AI infrastructure was corrupted. For the first time in decades, the Great Firewall collapsed, exposing the nation's secrets and vulnerabilities. Chaos erupted as the government lost control over its vast surveillance grid. Across Europe, stock markets crashed, airports shut down, and entire countries faced economic ruin. Thousands of people took to the streets in panic as police forces, now blind and disconnected, struggled to contain the chaos. The world's most powerful nations have been reduced to fragmented, leaderless states in a matter of minutes. And in the shadows, the specters moved. Ghost's next move. Back in Geneva, Solomon's team had no time to absorb the disaster. "We need to move. Now." Solomon barked, his tone sharp. "If we stay here, we die." As if to emphasize his point, the distant rumble of engines grew louder. More Spectre forces were arriving. Jamie checked her HUD. Enemy reinforcements, drones, armored convoys, and heavy troops. "They're cleaning up survivors." Vikram grinned. "Good thing we're not the ones getting cleaned up." Carlos grabbed his gear. "What's the plan?" Solomon's gaze hardened. "We don't just escape. "We find Ghost." The others exchanged looks. After everything they had just witnessed, the fall of global stability, the crippling of entire nations, they knew one truth remained. Ghost was still out there, and as long as he lived, humanity's suffering was only beginning. The streets of Geneva, a battlefield. As the team moved, the city had already turned into a war zone. Buildings burned. Looters ransacked stores, while security drones executed anyone deemed a threat. The once orderly streets of Geneva had transformed into a battleground between private militaries, rogue AI-controlled machines, and desperate survivors. Above them, fighter jets roared through the sky, engaging enemy drones in violent dogfights. The hum of attack helicopters filled the air, their missiles striking both Spectre convoys and government forces indiscriminately. The Geneva police force had been wiped out in the first few hours of the attack. What remained were mercenaries and resistance fighters, fighting over whatever scraps of power they could claim. "Stay low," Solomon whispered as they moved through the shattered remains of a luxury shopping district. "We're ghosts now. A new land rises, the elves' secret plans." Far from the burning world of men, on the newly formed Elven Island, a different kind of discussion was taking place. Inside the gleaming halls of an ancient-style fortress built upon the ruins of former McMurdo Station, two figures stood before a massive divine artifact, its glowing runes pulsing with unnatural energy. The air crackled with latent magic, ancient scripts illuminating the dimly lit chamber with an eerie silver glow. One of the figures, Princess Diana von Forestia, twin sister of Prince Diog, stood with an air of quiet intensity. Her silver hair shimmered under the magical glow, her piercing violet eyes locked onto the shifting runes before her. "The cataclysm has begun," she murmured, her voice carrying both pride and grim determination. "Humanity is tearing itself apart. Their so-called great nations are consumed by their own hubris." Beside her, Mary, the Royal Knight Commander, stood in her ornate golden armor, her expression unreadable. Unlike Diana, her connection to this war was deeply personal. Diog had fallen. He had vanished, captured by humans or worse. But neither Diana nor Mary accepted the idea that he was dead. For Diana, it was unthinkable. Her twin, her other half, could not simply cease to exist. She would have felt it. She would have known. Mary, it was unacceptable. Her lover, her future, could not have been taken from her so easily. Not by mere humans. Not by weaklings who needed machines to match elven might. Some of the high elves, the commanders of the invasion, had dismissed the prince as lost, another casualty of war. But neither Diana nor Mary would accept such a fate. He was alive, somewhere on Earth, and they would tear the planet apart to find him. But their success was not purely their own doing. Deep beneath the fortress, in the dungeons where the air was thick with dampness and the scent of blood, a different kind of alliance had been forged. Months ago, when the elven invasion began with their capture of Antarctica, they had taken more than just research stations and maps. Among their prisoners were a faction of elite mercenaries known as the Black Sun, infamous for their brutality and loyalty to the highest bidder. At first, these mercenaries had resisted. Some had been executed, their bodies discarded in the icy wastelands. But those who had value, leaders, strategists, cyber warfare specialists, were interrogated, tortured, and ultimately broken. And in that process, the elves uncovered the truth. Spectre was not just a rogue organization under the banner of China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. That was merely a facade, a convenient lie. The reality was far older. Spectre had existed since the Middle Ages, perhaps even before. An ancient, secretive order, moving in the shadows of human civilization, manipulating wars, kingdoms, and empires for centuries. It was they who had infiltrated the great revolutions of history. It was they who had guided the rise and fall of superpowers, always ensuring that no one nation could maintain dominance for too long. They were neither loyal to nor truly controlled by any modern nation-state. They played them all, like pieces on a grand chessboard. And now, as humanity crumbled under the weight of the Cataclysm Protocol, Spectre sought new power, something beyond technology, beyond geopolitics, something only the elves could offer. Through the captured Black Sun mercenaries, an offer had been made, a proposal that neither side could ignore. The elves, with their magic, ancient knowledge, and divine favor, had something Spectre desired. And Spectre, with its vast network, hidden fortresses, and mastery of deception, had something the elves needed. A pact was formed, a cooperation between the hidden rulers of humanity and the rightful rulers of magic. Princess Diana turned from the divine artifact, looking directly at Mary. With Spectre at our side, Earth shall crumble even faster. And when the ashes settle, Forestia shall rise over the ruins of mankind. Mary's expression remained cold, but deep inside, a fire burned. Let them drown in their own chaos, while we prepare to take what is rightfully ours. And when the time comes, we will find Diag. We will bring him back. And deep in the darkness beneath the fortress, the first joint operations between the elves and Spectre were already beginning. The dawn of resistance. The Cataclysm Protocol had shattered the world, but it had not broken its will. Governments staggered back to their feet, bruised but determined. In a matter of days, emergency councils formed across Washington, Moscow, Beijing, London, Paris, and New Delhi, along with other surviving power centers. For the first time in history, all major nations stood united, setting aside political rivalries, past conflicts, and territorial disputes. The elves had revealed themselves. The Spectre had stepped out of the shadows. And now, humanity would fight back. Guerrilla warfare in the New World. With the world's digital infrastructure compromised, conventional warfare was impossible. Surveillance networks were unreliable. Missile guidance systems had been corrupted, and entire fleets were immobilized due to Spectre's influence. But humans had always adapted. If they could not fight in the open, they would fight in the dark. From the ruins of Geneva to the broken streets of New York, the forests of Siberia to the jungles of Southeast Asia, special forces, black ops units, and paramilitary cells launched attacks against Spectre strongholds and elven encampments. In Moscow, an elite Spetsnaz unit, working with rogue CIA and MI6 operatives, raided a hidden Spectre command post inside an abandoned Soviet-era bunker. The battle was brutal, as Spectre forces now wielded arcane abilities, their bodies reinforced by elven magic rituals. A Spectre commander, once a former Russian intelligence officer, unleashed a devastating bolt of dark energy, incinerating 3 soldiers in an instant. But before he could strike again, a well-placed sniper round from a GRU operative ended him. The battlefield had changed. Spectre had been granted magic, but humans had adapted faster. The Antarctic fleet set sail. Far to the south, the elves had not been idle. On the floating island forged from Antarctica's frozen heart, a massive fleet had been assembled. Sleek, silver-hulled elven warships, powered by both magic and stolen human technology, lined the icy docks. Their masts hummed with energy, great mana-infused cannons mounted along their sides. On the highest balcony of the Grand Citadel, Princess Diana von Forestia stood, overlooking her fleet. Her violet eyes burned with an obsession that only those who had lost something dear could understand. Beside her stood Mary, the leader of the Royal Knights, and the most dangerous thorn in Diana's side. Their rivalry ran deep, extending beyond political differences, beyond the very factions they represented. Diana, the proud princess, representing the faction of high elf nobles and royal elves contesting Queen Elara's throne. Mary, the warrior of common birth, the leader of Queen Elara's personally sanctioned army, and the woman Diag had chosen in secret. Both wanted Diag. Both were prepared to reshape the world for him. Mary did not kneel. She never would. Instead, she met Diana's gaze with unflinching confidence. "I take it you summoned me for something important," she said coldly. Diana's expression was neutral, yet sharp as a blade. She gestured toward the fleet. "The warships will set sail. They will strike the human nations near us, shattering their last bastions of control." She paused. "But I have another mission for you." Mary crossed her arms, unimpressed. I don't take orders from you. Diana smirked. Then consider it an opportunity. If you are as devoted to Diag as you claim, then you'll want to be the first to find him. A tense silence followed. A portal had been opened in the Amazon rainforest. Through it, Mary and her elite warriors would enter South America, a continent already in anarchy after the Cataclysm Protocol. Where governments had fallen, they would strike. Where Spectre had influence, they would make allies. And where Diag's presence was rumored, if he was alive, they would find him. Mary exhaled sharply, then turned toward the portal. I don't need your permission to do what needs to be done. Diana's voice followed her as she walked away. Of course you don't. But remember, Mary, if you fail, it will be me who finds him first. The Shadow Raid, entering the Amazon. Deep in the Amazon rainforest, a swirling portal pulsed with dark energy. The ancient elven magics had twisted the fabric of reality, linking their Antarctic stronghold to this new battlefield. From the shadows, Jaguar warriors, cartel remnants, and Spectre operatives watched, some in awe, others in fear, as Mary and her unit emerged, clad in obsidian armor, blades gleaming with arcane power. A Spectre agent, one of the organization's highest-ranking officers in South America, stepped forward. He was older, hardened by decades of Black Ops missions, his face scarred from a lifetime of war. Commander Mary, he greeted, his voice level but wary. Your arrival changes the game. Mary's golden eyes locked onto him. It is no longer a game. Behind her, her royal knights, elves trained in assassination, sabotage, and magical warfare, spread into the jungle, already preparing their first strike. Who stand against us? She asked. The Spectre officer exhaled, looking toward the distant horizon, where the first UN counteroffensive was rumored to be forming. Everyone, the United Nations strike back. At a hidden airbase in Australia, representatives of the surviving military forces of Earth gathered around a war table, studying the Elven fleet's movements with grim focus. The room was packed with high-ranking officers from the U.S., Russia, China, India, France, Britain, and more, nations that had once been rivals, now united by necessity. A U.S. admiral slammed a thick dossier onto the table, revealing satellite images of Elven warships departing Antarctica, splitting into fleets bound for South America, Africa, and Australia. We hit them before they land, he said, voice hard as steel. A Chinese general, his expression unreadable, examined the data. Their ships withstand missiles and artillery. Our best bet is close-quarters sabotage, crippling them from within. A Russian colonel, his uniform still bearing the scars of past battles with Spectre, nodded. Our Spetsnaz teams have operated behind enemy lines before. We know how they move. We can coordinate. An Indian Air Force marshal leaned forward. We still control several air bases in the Indian Ocean. Our pilots are ready to intercept their advance. For the first time in human history, the world's greatest military strategists worked as one. The plan was set. Elite strike teams would infiltrate and sabotage Elven warships. Aerial squadrons would engage in dogfights against magic-powered Elven flyers. Naval forces would mobilize to intercept landing fleets. Special forces would target Spectre's hidden bases, cutting off their Elven allies. This was no longer just a war. This was humanity's last stand, a world engulfed in flames. As the night deepened, the world braced for the next battle. In Antarctica, Elven warships glided over the frozen seas, bound for distant shores. In the Amazon, Mary's forces prepare their first assassinations and terror campaigns. In secret bases across the globe, humanity's last hope, the United Nations resistance, prepared their counterattack. The war had truly begun, and the fate of Earth hung in the balance. The storm breaks. The world had changed overnight. Where once the great nations of Earth fought wars over land, resources, and ideology, they now stood together against an enemy that threatened their very survival. The Elven fleet had left the frozen shores of Antarctica, sailing on shimmering waves of magic, and now the first great battle of the war was about to begin. The elves struck first. In the skies above the Indian Ocean, great winged beasts, sky serpents bound by elven magic, soared through the night, their riders wielding lances of crackling energy. Accompanying them were elven airships, sleek and almost ghost-like, slipping through the clouds with unnatural grace. Against them, squadrons of fighter jets, American F-22s, Indian Sukhoi, 30 MKIs, screamed through the atmosphere, unleashing their payloads. The first engagement began above the Maldives, where the Indian and U.S. Air Forces met the elven invasion head-on. The battle was unlike anything the world had seen before. Missiles and magic clashed, the sky becoming a canvas of fire and smoke. Elven warriors, riding on airborne steeds, weaved through anti-air fire, slicing apart jets with their enchanted weapons. But the humans adapted quickly. Jet pilots flew in coordinated formations, using superior speed and advanced radar systems to outmaneuver and take down elven flyers. It was chaos, and it was only the beginning. The fall of Madagascar. Western Indian Ocean, Madagascar. Rear Admiral Jean-Paul Moreau of the French Navy watched from the bridge of the FS Charles de Gaulle, his hands clenched into fists as the first reports came in. Elven fleet approaching the eastern coast. Hundreds of warships. Energy readings off the charts. Our missile strikes aren't penetrating their magical shields. They're deploying troops. Madagascar had been chosen as one of the first major landing zones for the Elven forces. The island's location made it a strategic foothold, allowing the invaders to control the western reaches of the Indian Ocean. The French and allied African militaries had reinforced it, but the sheer power of the Elven onslaught was overwhelming. Columns of silver-armored Elven warriors marched onto the beaches, their swords glowing with arcane fire. Elven spellcasters chanted in unison, raising towering walls of magical energy that blocked incoming artillery fire. Human tanks and infantry forces counterattacked fiercely, engaging in brutal close-quarters combat. But for every Elven warrior that fell, another two took their place. In the skies, French Rafale fighter jets and South African Gripens struggled to maintain air superiority. Though they managed to take down several Elven flyers, the sheer magical prowess of the enemy forced them into retreat. This is a radio VOMSO operating on 106.8 frequency. This is an emergency broadcast. French forces are pulling out of Madagascar and establishing a perimeter with Indian Navy to support a retreat of civilian population. All able bodies are advised to evacuate to the nearest ports. Madagascar has fallen. I repeat, Madagascar has fallen. By nightfall, Madagascar had fallen. The Elven banners now flew over its capital, Antananarivo. But it cost them. Thousands of elves lay dead alongside the human defenders. The war was proving far costlier than the invaders had anticipated. The Pacific counterattack. Somewhere in the Coral Sea. While the elves gained ground in the Indian Ocean, the battle for the Pacific was far from over. A massive naval armada, spearheaded by U.S., Australian, and Japanese fleets, prepared to intercept the Elven forces attempting to land in Australia. The aircraft carriers USS Gerald R. Ford, J.S. Izumo, and HMAS Canberra led the counteroffensive, launching wave after wave of attack aircraft. The elves, despite their magical might, were not invincible. The human navy had studied their weaknesses. Elven warships relied on magical shields, but those shields flickered momentarily when they fired their arcane cannons. The solution was simple. Time the missile strikes to hit precisely in those moments of vulnerability. And it worked. Explosions rocked the ocean as several Elven warships were torn apart, their once impenetrable defenses overwhelmed by the sheer precision of human weaponry. Tomahawk missiles, railguns, and torpedoes shredded the once mighty fleet. But the elves refused to back down. With a deafening roar, leviathans, massive sea serpents summoned from the depths, rose from the waves, smashing into human warships with terrifying strength. One of the leviathans wrapped itself around a destroyer, crushing it like paper before dragging it beneath the waves. Yet humanity endured. Through sheer force of will and superior tactics, the Pacific Fleet held the line. Australia remained untouched, for now. South America, the Shadow War begins. Deep in the Amazon rainforest, Mary moved like a ghost. The humid jungle was thick with the scent of damp earth and blood. Around her, her royal knights executed their mission with ruthless efficiency, striking key human outposts, eliminating resistance, and ensuring the elves maintained control over the region. But something was wrong. Even with Spectre's influence, the humans had not collapsed as expected. A village they had razed just a week ago had somehow been reoccupied and rebuilt overnight. Supply convoys they had intercepted kept returning as if they had endless reserves. Every time Mary and her forces secured a region, resistance forces reappeared, harassing their operations with guerrilla tactics. And now, Mary's forces had lost contact with one of their forward scouting parties. She crouched low, her golden eyes scanning the jungle. Somewhere in the darkness, something was watching them. A whisper of movement. A gunshot. One of her royal knights collapsed, a bullet perfectly placed between his eyes. Ambush! Gunfire erupted from the trees, and humans clad in jungle camouflage attacked with unrelenting precision. Mary's forces fought back with magic and swords, but this was not the open battlefield. This was the Amazon, and the humans had turned it into a killing ground. A flashbang detonated, blinding her momentarily. As her vision returned, she saw a human operative standing before her, dressed in black combat gear, a skull insignia on his shoulder. "You're not invincible anymore, elf." Then came darkness. The aftermath, a stalemate in the making. The first great offensive had begun, and neither side had claimed true victory. Madagascar had fallen, but at a cost the elves had not expected. The Pacific remained under human control, though the battles had only just begun. In South America, the war had turned into a brutal shadow conflict, with neither side willing to yield an inch. The elves had drawn first blood, but humanity had refused to break. For the first time, the invaders understood the truth. This war would not be easy, and humanity was far from defeated. POV, Mary, jungle of the Amazon. Mary's arms strained against the enchanted manacles binding her wrists. The room was dim, stone walls, glowing magical runes on the floor, and the scent of damp earth and blood. Her golden armor was gone, replaced with a linen tunic soaked in sweat and dirt. Spectre agents had brought her here under the pretense of diplomacy. Now, she saw the truth. She had been betrayed. Princess Diana had struck a secret deal with Spectre's leadership. A quiet exchange. In return for Spectre's silence on an internal rebellion brewing within their ranks, they would deliver Mary, alive. A bargaining chip. "You thought you were in control," sneered one of the agents, pacing around her like a vulture. "But this continent never belonged to the elves. It belongs to the shadows." Mary said nothing. Her sharp eyes followed his every move. She was alone, for now, but even a cornered wolf is dangerous. When the guard made the mistake of leaning too close, Mary moved like lightning. Her forehead smashed into his nose, cartilage cracked, blood sprayed. She caught the falling man's dagger with her manacled hands and twisted free, slashing upward with such brutal precision that another Spectre operative fell before he could raise an alarm. Then she ran. Magic surged through her blood like fire. Though weakened by confinement, she called upon the ancient solar flame, her golden aura blazing to life as she burst through a wall with raw power. Alarms echoed across the jungle base. She moved like a ghost through the compound, dodging bullets and tearing through enemies in a storm of fire and light. Her remaining royal knights, thought to be dead or captured, emerged from hiding, summoned by the signal flare she'd ignited above the tree-line. This was a trap, Mary growled to her second-in-command as they reunited. "We were never meant to win the Amazon. The humans fed us into their web, and Diana helped spin it. The time for conquest was over. It was time to regroup and survive." Mary gave the retreat order. Her forces disappeared into the mist, vanishing deeper into the rainforest toward the arcane sigils that would teleport them back to the Elven Island in the South Pacific. Thus ended the Elven campaign in South America. POV, Squadron Leader Satvik Singh, battle over Maldives. The Indian Ocean was ablaze. Satvik Singh, commander of the IF's elite Falcon Squadron, adjusted his HUD as his Su-30 MKI screamed across the sky. All around him, the dogfight raged. Elven sky serpents diving through clouds, their riders hurling magical spears that exploded with lunar light, while American F-22 Raptors danced between spells and shrapnel. "They're coming in from high altitude, bearing 270, crackled a voice on the comms. "I see them," Satvik muttered. "Falcon 3, climb and intercept. Falcon 6, flank left with the Raptors." Missile screamed. The combined U.S.-Indian Air Fleet was coordinating like a well-oiled machine. They'd learned from the earlier skirmishes, timing their missile volleys between serpent dodges, working in tight, multinational formations. And it was working. A sky serpent exploded into a spray of purple ichor as two Raptors locked it in a pincer maneuver. Satvik banked hard left and fired his BrahMos NG missile, which pierced through the magical ward of a passing elven airship and ignited it from within. "Target down," he whispered. Then came a call. "Sir, elven forces are retreating. They're pulling back from the Maldives." Satvik blinked. It was true. The once unbreakable elven formation was fracturing. High in the sky, the majestic sky serpents began falling back, weaving away from missiles and anti-air fire. Their formation broke off into long, graceful arcs, a tactical withdrawal. "But why?" "We didn't break them," Satvik murmured, narrowing his eyes. "They're leaving on their own terms." He didn't know it yet, but the elves attacking the Maldives were part of Mary's now-retreating faction, pulling back under her direct orders. The reason behind their retreat remained a mystery to the human forces. For now, POV, Princess Diana, port city of Toamasina, Madagascar. The wind blew strands of silver hair across Diana's face as she stepped onto the scorched dock of Toamasina, her boots echoing against blood-streaked wood. Her fleet had arrived too late to assist Mary, but early enough to witness the retreat of panicked humans fleeing the island. Madagascar now flew the royal banner of Forestia. Still, Diana frowned. This was not the plan, she muttered to her aide. Mary was supposed to succeed in the West. Why is she retreating? She was betrayed, the aide replied. By Spectre. Diana's heart twisted, but not with guilt, with calculation. Then she saw them, refugee boats overloaded with civilians, men, women, children, screaming, crying, desperate. She turned her back on them. Let them flee. We'll find them again on the mainland. POV, civilian, fleeing from Madagascar. Sita clutched her daughter tighter as the wooden boat bounced against the waves. The burning skyline of Madagascar vanished behind smoke and flame. All around her were dozens of other refugee vessels, packed with survivors. The air stank of fear, salt, and despair. The French had evacuated first, then the African Union soldiers, then the civilians, last as always. An old man beside her whispered prayers. A child cried for her father, who hadn't made it onto the boat. In the distance, they could still see elven warships, glowing ominously. "We'll be safe," Sita whispered, trying to believe it. "The navies are coming. They'll protect us." But in her heart, she wasn't sure anymore. POV, Commodore Jean Takahashi, battle near Solomon Islands. The second elven attack on Australia had begun, this time through the Solomon Islands, attempting to establish beachheads and strongholds closer to the northern coast of Queensland. Jean Takahashi stood on the bridge of JS Kaga, flanked by officers from Australia and the U.S. Navy. "They've taken some islands," one officer said grimly. "But they haven't broken the line, and they wouldn't." Thanks to early warnings and satellite coordination, human forces had deployed anti-air and anti-ship batteries across the coastlines. The Royal Australian Air Force, supported by Japanese and American fighters, blanketed the skies. Elven ships, trying to breach past the Coral Sea, were ambushed with cruise missiles, and those that got close were met with devastating close-quarters island warfare, where the dense jungle and trained troops made elven spellcasting risky and unreliable. "We hold the line," Jean said. This is our home, and they won't take it. The aftermath, global repositioning. South America was no longer an elven stronghold. Mary's retreat had cost them dearly, and the Amazon burned with human vengeance. The Maldives stood defended. Human pilots, working in cross-national teams, had dealt the elves their worst air defeat yet, though they didn't realize the elves withdrew intentionally. Australia remained unconquered. Only a few minor islands had fallen, but the main continent stood defiant. Madagascar was lost, but Princess Diana's presence suggested a deeper campaign was forming there. For the first time since the war began, humanity felt the winds shift. This was no longer just survival. It was the beginning of resistance. The silent fortress, Diana's POV. Madagascar, Antananarivo. The fortress stank of human blood. Princess Diana stood on the stone balcony of what used to be Madagascar's presidential palace. Now it was draped in the silver-blue banners of Forestia. Below, the streets were eerily quiet. Civilians had either fled or been evacuated by sea. The humans had left, but the land hadn't surrendered. She could still hear them. The cries of wounded elves, the wails of young priestesses who had lost their commanders, the rumble of distant artillery that had once pounded this city. Madagascar was theirs now, but it didn't feel like victory. Behind her, the wind carried the scent of ash. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer to Goddess Luna. But tonight, the stars did not respond. Diana's expression hardened. She had been sent by Queen Alara to turn Madagascar into a true fortress, a command post for the next phase of the war. Yet her arrival had been met not with celebration, but with despair. The soldiers whispered of the failed offensives in Maldives, South America, and the Pacific. The humans were not breaking. They were learning. We underestimated them, Diana muttered. Again, her thoughts were interrupted by her aide, Commander Volthura, a sharp-eyed, golden-haired high elf from the aristocrat faction, clad in elegant but battle-worn armor. Her presence was always formal, and her disdain for commoner blood was barely concealed, but she had proven competent, and more importantly, loyal. "My princess," Velthyra said with a respectful bow. "The scouts have returned." Confirmation. The humans are regrouping off the east coast. Satellite relay drones suggest American fleets are reinforcing the Indian Navy. Diana turned sharply. "Let them. Madagascar is no longer a forward camp. It's a citadel, and they'll bleed for every inch they try to take." She looked out across the blackened skyline, where elven sentries kept watch from enchanted towers. The humans had escaped on their boats and ships, but they hadn't fled far. Let them come, she thought. This time we are ready. Shadows beneath the canopy, Mary's POV. South America, Amazon rainforest, elven encampment. Pain still burned in her side from where the human had stabbed her. Mary sat beneath a twisted root, her golden armor streaked with blood and jungle grime. Around her, the remnants of her royal knight corps rested silently. Of the 300 who had once followed her into South America, only 70 remained. Captured by Spectre, betrayed in the shadows by the very humans she once trusted to negotiate, Mary had torn her way out of that trap with a fury unmatched. Steel and spell fire had cleared her path. Not even Spectre's cloaked agents could contain her wrath once she realized what had happened. They had never intended a ceasefire. It had been a trap to break her forces. She had lost dozens escaping, but she was alive. Her royal knights were bloodied, but breathing. And now she had made a choice. "Retreat," she said. Her second-in-command, a pale-haired sun knight named Tyrion, looked at her in disbelief. "You mean to abandon the mission?" "I mean to regroup," Mary replied. "They know us now. They've studied us. If we stay here, we'll be slaughtered one by one in this cursed jungle. It's no longer a battle. It's a noose tightening." With that, she carved the order into the glowing rune stone. "Evacuate all elven forces from South America. Return to the island. South America is lost." The spell flared and vanished into the sky. Far across the ocean, it would reach the elven command in Madagascar. And with it, the great retreat had begun. The Sky Inferno, human pilots POV. Maldives, 20,000 feet above sea level. Captain Neha Sharma of the Indian Air Force gritted her teeth as her Su-30 MKI cut a hard arc above the glowing ocean. Below her, the battle was chaos. Sky serpents streaked through the clouds like fire, their riders hurling bolts of lightning and ice. But Neha and her squadron had trained for this. Over the last few weeks, simulations had pitted them against everything from dragons to teleporting infantry. This was no longer an air force reacting to magic. It was one adapted to it. Fox 3, Neha called, and a missile streaked from her underwing rail. The serpent never saw it coming. With a shriek, the beast exploded mid-air, raining charred scales and elven flesh into the sea below. Another serpent dove at her from above, but an F-22 Raptor from the U.S. Navy intercepted, raking it with 20mm cannon fire until the beast spiraled down in flames. Across the comms, the voice of Commander Satvik Singh, leading the Indian 3rd Tactical Air Wing, echoed. All wings push forward. The elves are falling back. Hit them while they run. Indeed, the elven formations were breaking. Their sleek airships turned in retreat, and even the sky serpents were spiraling away, disappearing into magical portals above the sea. What Neha didn't know, what none of them knew, was that these forces had belonged to Mary. And with her retreat from South America, she had issued the same order to her scattered battalions attacking Maldives. Fall back. The humans have changed the game. For the Indian and American pilots, it was a hard-won victory. For the elves, it was a controlled withdrawal. The truth would only become clear in time. The Island War, Australian Commander's POV. Northern Coastline, Darwin Military Command. Brigadier Alan Choi stood over the digital map, tracking enemy movements across the Arafura Sea. So far, they've taken the Tanimbar and Aru Islands and have set up magical pylons on some of the smaller islets, reported his lieutenant. But the main push into mainland Australia has stalled. Alan exhaled. We finally pushed them back. Partially, sir. They've changed tactics. More scouting, more illusions. But yes, the second wave failed to breach the northern coast. The air strikes and naval support from Japan and the U.S. made all the difference. Outside, the boom of distant gunfire echoed. The elves had carved out strongholds on the islands, and it was likely they'd fortify them. But the humans had held their ground. Australia still stood. But Alan didn't feel like celebrating. Not yet. They'll be back, he muttered. And when they do, it won't be just islands. The Boat of Shadows, civilian POV. Indian Ocean, evacuation vessel Shanti 9. The waves rocked gently, but the silence on board was crushing. Rani Mehra, a 12-year-old girl from Toamasina, sat on the upper deck, staring at the burning skyline of Madagascar as it faded into the horizon. Her mother clutched her tight. Her baby brother slept in her lap. Her father had not made it to the docks in time. Elves came like ghosts, a man whispered nearby. Silver armor, glowing swords. The French tried to hold them. The African forces too, but it was like fighting lightning. Ronnie didn't speak. She remembered running, bombs falling, magic tearing through buildings, soldiers screaming, flames devouring the markets she used to visit with her father. A priestess had passed over their heads, chanting words that made people forget how to breathe. But then, through the chaos, came the boats. Dozens of them. Indian Navy sailors waving at people to board. French helicopters guiding civilians to safety. And somehow, Ronnie had made it on board. Now, they were heading west. Towards safety. Toward uncertainty. She looked back one last time. Madagascar was gone, but she was still alive. Epilogue. A world on fire. The elves had lost South America. They had failed to break the Pacific front. They had retreated from Maldives, unaware that their secrecy had spared them total destruction. But they had taken Madagascar, and from its shores, Princess Diana now prepared her next move. For humanity, it was a moment of hope. For the elves, it was a moment of regrouping. The war was far from over. The tide was shifting, and in the shadows of both worlds, new alliances and new betrayals were already beginning to form. Mission briefing. U.S. Naval Black Site, undisclosed location. The room was silent, save for the soft hum of a holographic projector. Solomon Kane stood at the edge of the circular table, arms crossed, his dark coat still smelling faintly of salt and smoke from his last mission. Around him, his hand-picked team waited. Jamie Lancaster, the young scientist he had once risked his life to rescue from the heart of the Elven stronghold. David, her father, ex-Special Forces. Beth, her mother, and Solomon's former love. And Ryan, David's longtime friend and combat medic. The projector lit up, casting a glowing map of the Indian Ocean. Admiral Henry Lancaster, grizzled and sharp even through the secure intercom line, spoke calmly. We've confirmed movement on what we're calling Elven Island Alpha. It surfaced 3 days ago, cloaked until now, 400 nautical miles southwest of Madagascar. You're going in to investigate. Covert recon? David asked. Affirmative. Eyes only. No unnecessary engagements. We need intel on whether the elves are regrouping or splitting apart. Reports suggest the latter. Solomon glanced at Jamie. She was no longer the trembling girl he had pulled from an elven fortress. Now she wore a tactical suit fitted with her own designs. Lightweight mech fiber armor with pulse battery nodes and a data mapping pack on her back. Her work in advancing Earth's mech technology had made her a top Spectre target. We move at dawn, Solomon said. Landing on Elven Island Alpha, Solomon's POV. The stealth sub breached the waves under a moonless sky. Drones swept ahead in silence, scanning the cliffs where elven watchtowers pulsed with faint blue light. The island was unnatural, its shape a perfect circle like it had been raised by magic, not tectonics. Solomon and his team made landfall beneath the cover of enchanted mist, cloaked by Jamie's modified ECM field. They crept through twisted silver trees, past broken statues and glowing stones etched with unfamiliar runes. This place feels wrong, Ryan muttered. Like the forest itself is watching. It probably is, Beth replied, her voice cool. Jamie paused beside a ridge. Her visor pulsed green. I found something. They crouched behind overgrowth overlooking a sunken courtyard. Below, 3 groups of elves stood in tense standoff. Solomon pulled out his scope. Princess Diana stood tall in ceremonial armor, flanked by golden-haired high elves, the aristocrat faction. Across from her, Mary, her armor dirted and cracked, stood with her remaining royal knights. A third group, cloaked in dark green and sea blue robes, watched from a distance. Their banners bore no-house sigils. These were the neutralists, elves who still believed in finishing the Earth invasion without internal power struggles. What the hell is this? David whispered. Solomon focused on Diana. Her voice rang out, amplified by magic. You disobeyed the crown, Mary. You abandoned South America. You left your mission. You are no longer commander of the Royal Knights. You are a traitor. Mary didn't flinch. I saved what was left of our forces. We were dying in that jungle, Diana. I chose to fight another day. You chose vanity. Tension rippled across the clearing. Magical energy crackled. Spears and blades hummed. Not good, Solomon muttered. We need to fall back. Jamie tagged this location. But it was too late. A shimmering barrier flashed around the clearing. The elves had sensed them. Ambush in the mist. Ryan's POV. The ground erupted in vines. Arrows soared past. Ryan rolled and returned fire with a suppressed SMG, bullets bouncing off a conjured shield. Contact front. 30 meters, he shouted. David hauled Jamie behind a tree, laying suppressive fire. Go, go. Solomon activated a gravity pulse mine. It detonated with a silent shockwave, slamming 2 charging elves into a boulder. Beth moved like a shadow, twin blades cutting down an attacker who lunged for Jamie. No one touches my daughter. From an ordinary mother to a battle-hardened warrior, the journey was only possible due to the new drug jointly developed by human forces, which can greatly enhance the human's body to its peak potential, and Beth was among the few who showed great acceptance to this drug, and now is able to accompany her family on missions. Jamie, breathing hard, slammed a glowing beacon into the ground. Fallback point marked. 10 seconds to jump. Solomon triggered his exosuit boosters and vaulted toward her. Now, they vanished in a flash of blue light. Jaime's emergency teleport activating just before an elven commander's blade struck the spot where Solomon had stood. Escape and revelation, Jaime's POV. They rematerialized in a cavern beneath their extraction point. Jaime staggered, drained. The beacon sparked and died behind her. "Everyone alive?" Solomon asked. Ryan winced, holding a gash on his thigh. "I'll live." David nodded. "We got what we came for." But that was close. Beth was already binding Ryan's wound. Those elves weren't just angry. They were fractured. Jaime looked up at the projections on her wrist unit. I scanned their communication pulses. They're split into 3 distinct military command networks. Different runes, different encryption methods. 3 factions, Solomon said. Just like the Admiral feared. Jaime brought up the data. Princess Diana, now fully leading the aristocrat faction, stationed in Madagascar. Mary, declared a traitor, retreating with her loyalists toward islands near Australia, forming the royal faction. The neutral elves, based on an island closer to Antarctica, still pursuing Earth's conquest without picking sides. "They're at war with each other," Jaime whispered. "They're not one force anymore." Solomon's eyes narrowed. "And that means we're not just fighting one enemy. We're fighting a civil war." Back at HQ, Henry Lancaster's intercom. They returned to the Black Site 12 hours later. Admiral Henry Lancaster's voice came through the intercom, gravelly with fatigue. "Report." Solomon stood at attention. "The elves are split. Madagascar is Diana's stronghold. Mary has gone rogue. The third faction remains independent. Their command structure is dissolving." Henry was quiet for a moment. "Good work. This changes everything. The factions will turn on each other. We can use that." Jaime stepped forward. "Sir, I suggest we create a targeted signal disruption across the elven frequencies. If we can provoke skirmishes between their factions." David raised an eyebrow. "You mean escalate their civil war?" Jaime nodded. "Exactly." Henry grunted. "We'll discuss it in Strategy Council. For now, get some rest. You've earned it." The intercom went dead. As the others filtered out, Beth lingered. She turned to Solomon. "You saved her again." "She saved herself," Solomon replied. Beth gave a faint smile. "Still the same answer after all these years." He didn't respond. She walked away, leaving him alone under the hum of the fading projector. Epilogue: 3 flames. Across the war-scorched world, new banners rose. In Madagascar, Princess Diana declared herself the rightful heir to the Elven War campaign, vowing to crush both human and traitor elf alike. In the Australian archipelago, Mary fortified lost islands with her remaining royal knights, refusing to bow to the crown that betrayed her. Near Antarctica, the neutral elves built silent towers under stormy skies, preparing for the next phase of their invasion, loyal only to the ancient decree: Earth must fall. And in the shadows of both Earth and Forestia, the war grew colder and more personal. A fortress forged in blood, Diana's POV. Madagascar, former presidential compound, Antananarivo. Princess Diana's silver eyes reflected the rising sun, tinted red from the smoke that still curled into the air from the southern districts. Below the palace, the land trembled, not from fear, but from transformation. Magic pylons hummed with power. Ancient elven warlords, newly reactivated, carved silver patterns into the earth. Forestia's banners rippled from high towers. Madagascar had fallen, but Diana knew it would not remain secure unless they moved forward. "My princess," Commander Valthyra stepped into the open hall, bowing with flawless grace. Her high elf armor gleamed, restored and ceremonial, yet her eyes were tired, like all who had survived the last month. The Eastern refugee vessels have begun arriving on the East African coast. Human reinforcements will not be far behind. "Good," Diana replied without looking back. "Let them come." She turned from the balcony and strode toward the war map, etched into obsidian and starlight on the central floor. It displayed much more than Madagascar. It now included the African mainland, glowing softly across the Mozambique Channel. "Are the aristocrat legions ready?" she asked. Valthyra nodded. "The House of Isolira has pledged 3 companies. House Vantra sent its Sky Lancers. House Elaine is still hesitant. Diana snorted softly. Let them hesitate. The age of hesitation is over. She placed her hand over the glowing plains of Mozambique. We strike tonight. Silent landings, illusion cloaks, priestess veils, thunderless spells. We take the port cities before dawn, and then we move inland. Velthyra hesitated. The neutral faction might object, even some within our own court. The queen ordered me to make Madagascar a fortress, Diana cut in. But a fortress must have buffer zones, must control supply lines, and must choke any path of human retaliation. That means the east coast of Africa must fall. I will not wait for the humans to rally. I will bring the war to their door. The aristocrat will be the one to bring glory to elves. And with that, she gave the command. The first assault into Africa had begun. Through the sea of smoke, civilian POV. Mozambique Channel, refugee vessel Amoya Tattoo. The smell of burning hung in Layla's hair like it had sunk into her soul. Even out on the open waters, the scent of Madagascar, the ash, the blood, the scorched stone, clung to everything. The small ferry-turned refugee ship rocked gently on the waves, its hull overloaded with more people than it had ever been meant to carry. Layla cradled her little brother, Musa, who hadn't spoken in 2 days. Not since the palace fell. Not since their mother vanished into the smoke, and soldiers dragged them onto the boats. Is that Africa? Someone whispered. Ahead, through the fog, lights glimmered on the horizon. The Mozambique coast. Home. She had lived her whole life on Madagascar. She barely knew anything about Africa. But now it was the only place left. The old priest beside her muttered prayers in Swahili. The French-speaking couple nearby held hands in silence. Most barely had clothes. No one had food. Suddenly, there was a shout from the upper deck. Soldiers, not humans. Something's flying. Layla clutched Musa tighter. High above, barely visible against the clouds, silver-winged figures passed overhead. Elves. They didn't attack the refugee boats. They didn't need to. They were heading to the shore. That was when Layla realized something terrible. The elves weren't chasing them anymore. They were going ahead to take where she was trying to run. The forgotten portal, neutral faction commander's POV. South America, deep Amazonian portal. Commander Valen Thorne stood at the rim of the overgrown ritual circle, the very same used by Mary's royal faction during the initial invasion of South America. Forgotten by both human intelligence and royal command, it had been buried under moss and shattered stone, until now. Behind her, hundreds of elven warriors, all marked with the gray-green sigils of the neutral faction, waited in silence. They bore no royal crests, no aristocratic colors. These were the pragmatists, those who sought neither dominion nor destruction, but only elven survival. Activate it, Valen ordered. A circle of priestesses lowered their staffs. The earth glowed. Vines uncoiled. The portal shimmered open. It's risky, her second-in-command murmured. Mary retreated for a reason. The jungle devoured her legions. That's because she attacked like a queen, Valen muttered. We will strike like hunters. One by one, neutral faction units stepped through the portal. No banners, no war drums, only silence and cloaking magic. The second invasion of South America had begun, not with fire, but with shadows. Valen stepped through last, and when she emerged in the dark green of the Amazon, she smiled. The jungle belonged to no empire. It belonged to those who listened. The island Requiem, Mary's POV. Undisclosed island base, south of Timor Sea. Mary sat in silence, legs folded, her bloodied armor resting on a pedestal nearby. Her side still burned where the human blade had pierced her. She refused healing magic. Pain reminded her of mistakes. Around her, the remaining 70 royal knights trained in tight silence, sparring in pairs, meditating, rebuilding shattered armor. Her island base, formerly a hidden elven observation post, now served as the royal faction's only sanctuary. Tyrion, her second-in-command, approached quietly. The scouts returned. The neutral faction has re-entered South America using the same portal we used. Mary didn't flinch. Let them. Tyrion frowned. They move without approval. No one seeks approval anymore, Mary replied, voice quiet. The queen has grown silent. The aristocrats burn Africa. The humans regroup and strike harder. This is no longer a war of orders. It's a war of survival. Tyrion paused. So what are we? Mary turned toward the sea, where the waves curled gently against the black rock shore. We are the storm waiting to return, she whispered. Let them forget. Let them chase shadows. But when we rise again, the world will remember why Queen Alara and her loyalists rule the Elven Empire. Africa burns, human commanders POV. Mozambique, Nacala Naval Base. Commander Asha Okonkwo ran a hand across her shaved scalp as reports kept pouring in. Magic flashes in the Eastern District. Sudden disappearances of comms units. Local militia stations vanishing overnight. Elves, she growled. Across the command table, her Brazilian counterpart, Colonel Pereira, nodded grimly. Same tactics they used on the Pacific Islands. We'll need to fall back to Maputo if they control the port. No, Asha said. We hold. If they take this coast, they'll have a direct magical route into Zambia, Tanzania, even Kenya. And this time, there are no oceans to protect us. But we're outgunned. We're not outmatched, she said, turning to the comms officer. Patch me to Pretoria, to Nairobi, to Addis. Wake the damn continent. Africa is under siege. And this time, it's not just a refugee crisis. It's a full-scale invasion. And in the dark sky above, silent wings passed. The first elven assault had begun. Epilogue, a world reignited. Princess Diana had turned Madagascar into a fortress. Now, she brought the war to Africa. Layla, the refugee girl, had survived one apocalypse only to see the next fall before her eyes. Valen Thorn, of the neutral faction, had returned to South America through the lost jungle portal, not for conquest, but for something older and more dangerous, balance. Mary, the wounded royal knight, bided her time. Her wrath was not yet spent. The elves were no longer a unified empire on Earth. They had become factions with diverging agendas, shadows of a dying supremacy. But the humans, too, had changed. In Africa, in South America, in the islands of the Pacific and across classified ocean command posts, something new was forming. Alliances, coalitions, countermeasures. The fires of war had not been extinguished. They had only scattered into sparks across the world. And a sky lit with fire, Diana's POV. Northern Mozambique, aristocrat forward operations camp. Princess Diana stood atop a makeshift watchtower formed of stone and enchanted steel. The stars above were beginning to dim as distant flashes lit the night sky. Tracer rounds, anti-aircraft fire, and the long, streaking lines of missiles. The humans had arrived in force. They moved faster than expected. Commander Volthura muttered beside her, eyes narrowed behind her visor. The radio signals we intercepted suggest a full joint assault. Diana's golden hair fluttered in the wind, its luster unmarred by the soot of war. Her gaze swept across the horizon. They said the humans would break, that their alliances were fragile. But here they are, advancing not just with armies, but with machines we've never seen. From their communications equipment, still crackling with intercepted transmissions, one phrase had repeated, translated across a dozen tongues. Let the skies burn and the mountains tremble. Elves shall fall under human might. And with it came the names of the machines. USA, Gray Eagles. Russia, Blue Titan. China, Red Archer. India, Green Guardian. Mechs, towering war golems forged of steel, not magic. Diana clenched her fists. They mean to retake Antarctica's island fortress, Velthyra said. The humans are converging. But they underestimate us, Diana finished coldly. And I will not retreat for an artifact I've never seen. Velthyra hesitated. Princess, Queen Alara has issued a directive. She's recalled all remaining forces to defend the island. She believes the artifact hidden there allows portals to be opened from Earth to Forestia from our side. Diana turned slowly. And you believe this? I do not know, Valthyra admitted. Diana's smile was thin and sharp. The queen is wise, but power dims in exile. No one saw fit to tell us of his artifact until now. Convenient, isn't it? Just as we begin to crush Africa under heel. Others are heeding the call, Valthyra warned. Diana's eyes turned north, toward the coast where refugee camps once stood, now military staging grounds. Let them go. The aristocrats do not yield to fear or rumors. We do not abandon a continent because of some mythical trinket. And with that, the aristocrat faction officially severed itself from Alera's unified war command. Tides of Resistance, Asha Okonkwo's POV. Mozambique, Nacala Naval Base, War Room. The base reeked of ozone, diesel, and scorched jungle. Commander Asha Okonkwo hadn't slept in 36 hours. No one had. Since the Elven push through Madagascar and across the Indian Ocean, the East African coastline had become a crucible of blood and defiance. But today, the map of the world had changed. We will not surrender the coast, she said, eyes blazing like wildfire, as she faced the gathered African military leaders. Kenya, Tanzania, Angola, and South Africa all represented in the cramped war room. The tactical display showed a digital map of coastal Africa. Red warnings blinked over Dar es Salaam, Beira, and Nampula. Elven glyphs marked areas under enemy control. Their magic distorted satellites. Communications flickered in and out. We hold the corridor from Nacala to Pemba. If we lose this stretch, they'll break through into Malawi and Zambia. General Mbatha of South Africa stared down at the glowing map. We know, but how do we stop them? Our weapons falter against their cloaks. Sky Lancers break our air patrols. They're not like any army we've fought. Asha gestured to her head engineer, Dr. Tebaho Mensah. Tebaho activated the hologram. We present the disruptor grid, he announced. A harmonic sphere formed in midair, displaying a pulsing wave over a stylized elven warship. Developed through Indo-French collaboration using salvaged elven, cloaking crystals, and South Indian resonance fields. It jams arcane frequencies. Think of it as scrambling their version of Wi-Fi, cutting off their spellcasting, clouding their cloaks, and grounding airborne units. Will it kill them? One commander asked. No, but it will blind them. And that's enough. Asha nodded. We field-tested it in Pemba. We turned the tide. One pulse grounded 6 Sky Lancers and forced an elven withdrawal. General Mbatha finally smiled. Then let the world see that Africa remembers how to fight. Veins of the Forest, Valen Thorn's POV. Amazon Rainforest, South America. Neutralist Commander Valen Thorn stood at the edge of the broken human settlement. The tribe that once resisted their jungle advance now lay bound in chains, silent, eyes wide with defeat. These humans fought well, her lieutenant said. They did, Valen replied without emotion. But conquest is not earned through mercy. The neutralists were no longer pretending to be observers. The failed diplomacy of earlier months was over. They had one goal now: conquer Earth by any means necessary, and avoid civil war while doing so. No factional games. No loyalty to a queen who ruled from shadows. No patience for aristocratic grandeur. Valen watched as her soldiers erected perimeter wards and slave pens. We've decrypted human signals, her aide reported. The artifact they speak of, it's real. Not myth. It exists on the breakaway Antarctic island. A portal generator, Earthside. And Queen Alera wants to defend it, Valen murmured. So does Mary. But you don't believe her? Valen's green eyes flashed. I don't care. Whether it opens one portal or 1,000. It's only useful if we control the Earth. I will not march my soldiers into frozen death just because a fading monarch dreams of saving her throne. Let the royalists bleed in the ice. Let the aristocrats chase Africa. We will take South America, the resources, the land, and enslave every tribe that resists us. Diana's warpath, aristocrat assault POV. Dar es Salaam, Tanzanian coast. Diana landed amidst a sea of burning buildings and crumbling resistance. Her blade glistened with arcane runes, silver and cruel. Push forward, she ordered her troops. Crush their will before they rally. Her battalion of sky lancers swooped overhead. High elven mages conjured shimmering fire and lightning to shatter barricades. But resistance had learned. A deep pulse thundered from a rooftop weapon, a frequency disruptor. The air rippled. Cloaks malfunctioned. Spells backfired. 3 sky lancers fell screaming into a ruined cathedral. Diana frowned. "Give me eyes on that signal," she barked. Then came the radio message. "This is United Africa Resistance Command. Dar es Salaam holds. To all civilians and fighters, fight back. Fight smart. They're not gods." The message repeated across hijacked frequencies. Civilians took up arms. Militias surged from alleyways. "Adapt," Diana muttered, frustrated. "They're learning too fast." She called for reinforcements from the sea. This war was no longer about victory. It was about control, and she was losing hers. The Silent Queen, Ilara's POV. Forestia, Moonlight Citadel. Ilara stood at her high balcony as the twin moons aligned above her citadel. The stars shimmered, but the silence within her was deafening. The lunar goddess no longer whispered. Below, courtiers bickered. Mary's royal knights had gone rogue. Diana scorched continents, and Valen was doing what was originally proposed. The Elven Empire was splintering. Ilara placed her hand on the moon mirror. The mirror pulsed with magical feedback. Images from Earth shimmered across it. Flames in Africa, rebel banners in South America, skyships retreating from Southeast Asia. But then the mirror trembled. A new vision formed. "This is Pacific Command. Repeat. Humanity is moving towards the original Antarctic island stronghold of the elves. Enemy cloaking systems partially disabled. We're moving in with full mechanized assault units. The danger is increasing, though Diana doubts your loyalty, but she herself is drunk on the songs sung by those golden-hair aristocrats and dreams of the throne. I once saw love in your eyes for Diag, so once again I will test your loyalty. Mary." Mary awakens, Royal Knights POV. Southern Timor Sea, Elven Island Base. Mary's golden hair gleamed in the lantern-lit chamber as she opened her eyes. The tides had shifted. "I felt something," she whispered. Tyrion, her second-in-command, approached. "A disturbance?" The Queen's envoys. "No," she said. "Humanity, they're in the old stronghold." She turned to the balcony, watching the sea glitter under the moonlight. Mary stood alone before the circular crystal basin, a lunar relay, one of the few means left to contact the Queen directly across the dimensional barrier. The water shimmered with Ilara's face, weary yet regal. "Mary, they're no longer listening," Ilara said, voice soft and urgent. "But you must. The artifact hidden beneath the island is real. If the humans seize it, they can open their own portals into Forestia. We will not survive that." "I believe you, my queen," Mary said, golden hair braided back in a tight crown. Her voice was calm, resolved. "Good. The others may mock me. But you have always understood." The relay dimmed. Mary turned to her second-in-command. "Prepare the fleet. We sail south. But why are we following the Queen's decree?" Princess Diana declared us a traitor, and the Queen was silent. "I no longer serve a crown," Mary said coldly. "I serve a memory. I serve Diag." Tyrion hesitated. "You think he's alive?" Mary smiled faintly. "I know he is." She summoned her royal knights, gold-armored, loyal to no faction, only to her. They served at first due to Queen's prestige and charm, and now Mary's heroic bravery has won their heart. Their ships, faster than standard elven vessels, reinforced with ancient silverwood, were soon packed with arms, mechs, and spellcasters. "The Antarctic wind howls," Mary said. "Let it hear our vow." Epilogue: Fractures of War. Diana, leading the aristocrats, pushes deeper into Africa, ignoring the Queen's call and dismissing the artifact's threat as political manipulation. Valenthorn, the ruthless neutralist, expands her dominion over South America, enslaving human tribes and refusing to aid in defending the artifact. Mary, loyal to the end, not to Queen but to Diag, braces for an onslaught on the artifact island. Aware that she is the last line of defense between Forestia and Earth, and led her royal knights toward the southern frost, determined to reclaim the first elven fortress. Asha Okonkwo became Africa's bulwark, her resistance both human and technological. Queen Alara tried to hold together her breaching empire and tries to stop the invasion from becoming a counter-invasion. And now, at the edge of the world, Grey Eagles soared, Blue Titans rumbled, Red Archers flanked, Green Guardians advanced. The war for Antarctica had begun again. But this time, Earth was on the offensive. The world held its breath. High above the turbulent Antarctic waters, a steel leviathan loomed. The USS George Washington, cutting across the ice-choked sea like a predator reborn from metal and fire. Around her sailed a fleet of titanic proportions, 6 American aircraft carriers, each flanked by their escort groups, followed by the naval forces of China, Russia, India, and allied nations. This was no mere task force. It was a coalition armada, the spearhead of Earth's final reckoning with the elves. Below deck, the hangar bays thrummed with life. The mechs, 5 meters of war-forged fury, stood in perfect rows like slumbering gods. Hydraulic limbs glinted under harsh fluorescent lights. Armor plates were emblazoned with national insignias. Technicians scurried over them, conducting final checks. Pilots, already in their neural sync suits, stood silently beside their machines, listening to the final mission briefing. Admiral Henry Lancaster stood at the head of the command bridge, back straight, expression ironclad. His silver hair caught the light from the overhead monitors as he stared at the unfolding simulation. This was his second assault on the elves, and this time there would be no retreat. All units, this is Admiral Lancaster. His voice rang out through every ship, mech bay, and forward command post. This is not just a battle for Antarctica. This is a battle for our species. For every researcher who never came home. For every sailor who vanished beneath the ice. We stand today not as Americans, Chinese, Russians, Indians, but as Earth. Mech teams deploy as planned. The operation begins in 30 minutes. Godspeed. He turned to his second-in-command. Launch the drones. I want real-time visuals before the first pod touches snow. Aye, sir. Above the icy wastes. Thousands of meters above the continent, stealth drones streaked through the sky. Small, fast, nearly invisible to the naked eye. Their feeds began pouring into the CIC. High-resolution maps of the Elven Fortress, heat signatures of patrols, and, most importantly, active magical barriers that shimmered faintly against infrared. The fortress at McMurdo had changed since Solomon Kane's last report. Towering spires of crystallized moonstone now jutted into the clouds, radiating divine energy. Dozens of elven anti-air emplacements, cloaked by layered enchantments, waited like cobras beneath the snow. Lunar priestesses chanted atop balconies, their hands glowing with cold blue fire. Mary stood atop the highest tower, her golden sun knight armor reflecting the light of the pale southern sun. Her eyes scanned the horizon, expression unreadable. Around her, high elves discussed the recent troop movements, unaware of what loomed just beyond the veil of magic. Then, the first tremor came. Phase 1, the ghosts arrive. American mechs plunged through the clouds in stealth drop pods, their forms cloaked by adaptive nanoskin and electromagnetic dampeners. The moment they breached the elven detection field, they switched to full manual control. 50 pods landed in complete silence across a wide perimeter, one every 200 meters. The snow muffled their impact. Then the pods hissed open. The mech stepped out, sleek, angular, armed with railguns and anti-magic warheads. Their AI-assisted targeting systems identified enemy spellcasters first. They moved with terrifying precision, striking from behind ridgelines, inside crevasses, and beneath snowbanks. The first elven patrol never saw them. The second tried to raise an alarm, but their priestess dropped mid-chant, her throat torn by a rail round. Within 20 minutes, the American mechs had carved out 5 staging zones, dismantling the outer defensive rune circles without alerting the inner fortress. Phase 2, Iron Curtain. Then the Russians came. Their drop pods landed with thunder, shaking the permafrost. Their mechs were beasts, broad-shouldered, heavily plated, bristling with rotary cannons, flamethrowers, and plasma maces. They moved slower, but with implacable force. Once the Americans cleared the zones, Russian mechs locked them down, deploying mobile shield generators and heavy emplacement turrets. Snow exploded around them as elven scouts finally responded, war horns crying out. The first wave of elven cavalry, riding beasts conjured from starlight, rushed the landing zones. They were met with flame and lead. One Russian mech locked its arm around a charging elven knight and crushed him mid-swing. Another stood firm under a barrage of ice spears, its auto-cannons tearing through the storm. Behind the front lines, the first landing ships began to touch down, heavy transports ferrying troops, mobile hospitals, and logistics teams. Phase 3, the Eye of Heaven. Above the battle, Chinese mechs deployed onto forward platforms aboard their carriers, their rail turrets unfolding like mechanical lotuses. From miles away, they began precision strikes. Their targeting algorithms, developed through years of AI warfare simulations, picked off elven mages atop the towers with lethal calm. One Chinese mech pilot whispered softly in Mandarin, "Wind flows. Blade cuts." He squeezed the trigger. A tower's top exploded, the priestess atop it vanishing in a plume of flame. Every elven counterattack was met with deadly retaliation. Where the Americans struck from shadows and the Russians held the line, the Chinese turned the sky into a rain of fire. Phase 4, the Guardians arrive. Finally, the Indian mechs emerged, glowing green and gold, their frames lined with ether-reactive panels. Unlike the others, their weapons were not solely physical. They projected shimmering domes of energy, magic shields, capable of bending or nullifying incoming spells. As a second wave of elven magic began to rise, a wave of ice storms and solar lances, the Indian mechs formed a protective phalanx around the landing sites. Their shields rippled under the assault but held firm. Behind them, Earth's infantry disembarked in waves. American Marines, Chinese PLA Special Forces, Russian Spetsnaz, Indian Gruds, British SAS, and more. Tanks rolled off hover barges, UAVs buzzed overhead, and mobile artillery set up behind ice ridges. Lancaster watched the simulation update in real time. All sectors green, minimal resistance beyond outer wall. But he knew better. The elves had not yet truly begun to fight. Inside the fortress, Mary's expression darkened as she watched the outer barrier collapse on the scrying mirror. "They've learned," she said quietly. The steel tide crashes ashore. The howling wind tore across the Antarctic battlefield, swirling snow and ash into the dawn-tinted sky. From orbit, the second wave of Earth's retaliation plummeted like falling stars. Dozens of drop pods containing humanity's most advanced 5-meter-tall war machines. Inside one such pod, Captain Samuel Briggs, the American lead mech pilot, stood braced against the bulkhead. His short-cropped hair was damp with sweat beneath his helmet, but the signature smirk never left his lips. "Ladies and gentlemen," he drawled over comms, "let's go remind these knife-eared freaks what shock and awe really means." All around him, gray-colored American stealth mechs activated their cloaking modules. Their outer hulls shimmered before fading into near invisibility, light-bending technology masking their presence. They would strike first, silently clearing the path. Green light. Dropping now, Briggs snapped. The floor beneath his feet vanished, and he plummeted toward the glacier-ridden battlefield below. Elsewhere in the formation, Major Viktor Petrov, Russia's commanding mech officer, sat calmly in his cockpit as his heavier mech launched. A scar stretched across his cheek, unmoved as he barked orders in a deep baritone. "After Americans, we land. We hold line. Crush, counterattack." Blue-armored Russian mechs followed the Americans, their bulk immense, bristling with heavy weapons. Their role was to secure the breach zone, lock it down, dig in, and repel any elven pushback. From the eastern carrier wing, Colonel Zhao Wei directed the Chinese precision unit. Her tone was measured, her every word weighted with precision. Sniper teams, mark arcane towers. Destroy them before they signal reinforcements. If they can't see, they can't cast. Red-painted Chinese mechs surged forward, some remaining on the cliffs and ice shelf for overwatch, railguns and laser-guided systems humming. Their targeting systems blinked red, one tower, then another, before silencing them with pinpoint destruction. At the rear, holding the shield line that protected the drop zones and medical crafts, stood the Indian contingent led by Commander Arjun Mehta. Clad in dark green, his mech's arms were folded as energy domes shimmered around allied positions. Green-plated Indian mechs stood shoulder to shoulder, shield emitters glowing like emerald lanterns amid the snowstorm. "Shields stable," Arjun said softly, his voice calm even in chaos. "Petrov, your rear is covered. Zhao, coordinate overlapping fields for the sniper roosts." "Understood," Zhao replied curtly. "Much appreciated," Petrov added. The four commanders had worked together during the first assault. Now, with deeper coordination and a shared enemy, they moved like parts of one massive, ruthless machine. The Elven second defense line was buried beneath ancient glacier ridges reinforced by enchantments. Crystal towers pulsed with energy, and outposts shimmered under cloaking veils. But none of that would stop what Earth had brought. Briggs' gray mech struck first. Undetected, they slid through the outer perimeter like phantoms. Explosives were placed. Sensors jammed. When the detonations came, the entire north quadrant of the Elven fortress went up in flames. Seconds later, Petrov's blue-armored titans landed with seismic force. Their heavy mechs crushed through fallen towers and arcane barriers, autocannons unleashing storms of lead and plasma into regrouping Elven forces. Elven warriors screamed spells, blades of fire and frost, but were cut down before they could finish incantations. "Advance now," Petrov bellowed. "Do not stop. Tower on left. Eliminate it," Zhao commanded, and in response a red Chinese railgun cracked. A priestess tower collapsed in on itself. Magic surged across the ice field. Brilliant blue sigils traced into the sky, arcing toward the invading mechs. But Arjun's division was ready. "Shields," he ordered. The green Indian mechs activated their magical shield projectors, repurposed from ancient Vedic principles, enhanced with modern energy reactors. Giant, translucent domes shimmered into existence just as the elven magic struck. Explosions echoed. But when the smoke cleared, Earth's machines stood untouched. Inside his mech, Arjun's eyes narrowed. "Briggs, go. We'll hold the corridor." "Much obliged," Briggs said, jetting forward to take point in the push toward the heart of the second Elven stronghold. As the allied mechs converged, battle broke into brutal close quarters. Elven battle mages unleashed bursts of lunar fire, but were overwhelmed by coordinated assaults. Red Chinese snipers picked off command units. Blue Russian titans formed an unmovable wall, protecting engineers and breaching teams. Gray American mechs, agile and fast, darted through cracks and hunted down retreating elites. Then came the final push. "Glyph tower ahead," Zhao marked. "Deep root. It's powering their underground veil." "On it," Briggs confirmed, his gray mech igniting boosters to leap across a ravine. He crashed through the spire's outer defenses, slamming plasma charges into its base. Behind him, Arjun's green shield domes absorbed a desperate counterspell launched by a dying priestess. The tower collapsed. The veil flickered. From above, orbital satellites immediately locked on and began relaying full data: Elven positions, tunnel maps, power sources. "We have it," Zhao said. "The veil's down," Arjun confirmed. And in that moment, the frozen battlefield shifted. No longer hidden, no longer protected. The Elven second base, long thought impregnable, lay exposed to the full fury of Earth's retaliation. The four commanders regrouped on a high ridge, their mech scarred but standing tall in their respective colors: gray, blue, red, and green, a symbol of unity forged in steel and fire. "Begin Phase 2, Briggs said, his smirk wider than ever. Petrov cracked his knuckles inside the cockpit. "Now we finish this." Zhao nodded sharply. Coordinates locked. Artillery synced. Arjun gave a single word: "Proceed." Below them, missiles launched, drills burrowed into the glacier's heart, and the steel tide crashed not just against the elves, but through them. As they approached the enemy stronghold buried beneath a collapsed glacier, Briggs switched to thermal scan, revealing a maze of tunnels, flickering heat signatures, and concentrations of magical energy deep underground. "Tunnel breachers on me," he ordered. "Time to gut this fortress from the inside." And with that, Earth's elite steel tide surged forward, not just to retake land, but to bury the myth of elven invincibility beneath tons of metal and fire. Underground awakening. The thunder of collapsing towers still echoed above, but beneath the ice, a different war began. Captain Samuel Briggs dropped into the ravine first, his gray American mech's boots slamming into a cavern floor of ancient crystal and stone. His thermal scanners lit up with tangled heat signatures: elves, arcane reactors, and something else, something alive and massive. The deeper layers of the elven fortress were no longer hiding. The collapse of the glyph tower had exposed their heart. "Tunnel squad, report in," Briggs snapped. "Petrov team in position," came the Russian commander's voice, heavy and steady. "Zhao's snipers holding upper cliffs," the Chinese colonel confirmed. "We'll provide overwatch and coordinate fire through satellite uplink." "Shields extended underground," said Commander Arjun metacalmly. "We have a mobile barrier generator ready to deploy in breach zones." Briggs's mech stalked through the widening tunnels, plasma rifle humming in the dark. Around him, American stealth mechs shimmered into partial visibility, wraiths in the gloom. "I see movement." "For contacts." Elven guards, blades drawn, spells primed. "Take them silently," Briggs ordered. A second later, soft bursts of light and heat marked where suppressor rounds and blade charges neutralized the guards. No alarms, no warnings. But it wouldn't last. The heart of the fortress. Further in, Petrov's division advanced with brutal momentum. The blue-armored Russian titans moved like glaciers, slow, unyielding, crushing everything in their path. "Arcane seal ahead," Petrov growled. A glowing rune pillar blocked the corridor, pulsing with ethereal frost. "Engineers, breach now." Two Russian engineers, piloting smaller utility mechs, moved forward. With electromagnetic disruptors and arc flammers, they began dismantling the seal. Suddenly, the tunnel flared with light. A dozen elven battle mages emerged from shimmering walls, cloaked by illusion, waiting for their moment. "For Luna," one shouted, her silver blade glowing with divine fury. Energy surged toward Petrov's lead mech. "Shields up," he barked. The frontliners raised their arms and took the full blast. The armor buckled but held. Petrov stepped forward, slamming his fist-mounted cannon into the lead mage. The impact turned her into a burst of mist. "Break their line." Behind him, Indian shield mechs arrived, emerald domes projecting through the corridor as a moving wall of protection. Arjun's voice cut through the comms. "Push now." They're collapsing the ceiling behind them. Explosives detonated. Rocks and ice fell. But Arjun's mechs raised shields high, holding the tunnel aloft. Petrov's men surged forward, slaughtering the retreating mages before they could regroup. The engineers resumed their work and shattered the seal. Briggs' voice came through. "We're inside the control node. Looks like a chapel?" "No, a command nexus. Magical maps, leyline diagrams, power sources." "I have visual," Zhao Wei said. "The fortress core. You're close." The inner sanctum. Briggs entered the chamber, vaulted and ancient, illuminated by crystalline veins in the walls. In the center stood a circular platform inscribed with high elven runes. Hovering above, it was a spherical construct of silver and crystal, pulsing like a heart. Arjun's voice came in. That's the Ice Heart core. It powers the entire second fortress. Destroying it could collapse this region, but also disrupt the southern ley line shield. Risky, Briggs muttered. But we didn't come here to tiptoe. As he approached, the core flared with lunar magic. From hidden alcoves around the chamber, royal elven sentinels emerged, tall, silver-haired, clad in divine armor. Unlike their common brethren, they didn't shout or scream. They moved like silent death. One raised her hand, and a blast of lunar fire struck Briggs square in the chest. Shields crackled, systems flickered, but his mech held. "Contact!" Briggs yelled, diving for cover behind a fallen column. "Need support now." "I'm on my way," Arjun said. Zhao's snipers began firing from cliff-mounted artillery, energy rounds carving through the upper tunnels and dropping rubble over the sentinels' heads. Petrov barreled into the room moments later, slamming one royal sentinel into a wall hard enough to crack the stone. "Let's end this." The fight was vicious. The royal sentinels used teleportation glyphs, divine shields, and devastating sword techniques that cut into even the reinforced armor of Earth's mechs. One by one they fell, but not without cost. 2 stealth mechs were torn apart. A Russian heavy lost an arm. Briggs' systems went red across half his HUD. But in the end, the last sentinel fell with a whispered prayer to Luna. Arjun entered as the dust settled. "Let's overload the core," Briggs said, stepping onto the platform. Zhao's voice came in. "Satellite has the southern ley line in full view. Disabling this core will expose half the remaining defense." "Then do it," Arjun said. They synchronized energy pulses from their mechs into the Ice Heart core. It resisted, screamed in divine tongues, but then cracked. Light exploded upward in a pillar that tore through the glacier's roof. Far above, Zhao's snipers watched as the southern veil shattered like glass. Back on the surface, high above, in the Elven Command Tower, still under Mary's authority, alarm screamed. The High Elf tactician beside her paled. "The Ice Heart has fallen. The veil is gone. They're coming." Mary said nothing. Her sharp eyes stared through the magic mirror, seeing the ripple in the sky. The barrier that had kept Earth's full assault at bay was now gone. "Ready the third line," she said at last, "and alert the lunar priestesses. We hold this ground, or we fall with it." The signal heard round the world. In every military base across Earth, the moment did not go unnoticed. In orbit, satellite feed confirmed. The second Elven fortress was no longer shielded. The magical veil was broken. Admirals and generals cheered. In New Delhi, Admiral Chauhan turned to his staff. "Tell every commander, the path is open. Begin full deployment." In Washington, in Beijing, in Moscow, in Tokyo, orders were given. Thousands of reinforcements were prepped. Bombers and carriers surged forward. Mechs were awakened from cryolocks. The final assault would come next. But in that frozen, sacred chamber deep within the glacier, the first true victory had already been won. Briggs, Petrov, Zhao, and Arjun stood atop the broken Ice Heart, their battered mechs silhouetted in divine light. "The tide," Briggs whispered, "has turned. Tremors beneath the ice." The earth rumbled. It began as a subtle tremor beneath the boots of the mechs, then grew into a throbbing pulse, deep, ancient, and wrong. Captain Samuel Briggs, still leading the vanguard, halted atop a ridgeline, his gray mech's sensor spiking. "Did anyone feel that?" he asked over the shared command channel. "I see nothing," Colonel Zhao replied, scanning her red mech's instruments. "No artillery, no spells, just movement." Petrov's gruff voice broke in. "Earthquake." "No," Commander Arjun Mehta said calmly, though his tone carried a sharp undertone. "It's something else, something alive." Briggs's smirk faded. They had pushed deep into the now exposed elven stronghold beneath the glacier, claiming ground corridor by corridor, sanctum by sanctum. Broken towers, collapsed temples, and shattered ruins littered the battlefield. Humanity had won this far, but victory had come too easily once the veil fell. Too easily. Far below, nestled in a secret chamber once sealed behind magical glyphs, High Commander Mary stood before a massive obsidian pillar inscribed with ancient sigils. Her armor was scratched, the golden sun of her knight insignia dimmed, but her posture remained upright and defiant. Around her, only a few dozen of her royal knights remained, sun knights, lunar priestesses, and elite battle mages. The war had taken its toll, and the Earth forces had proven far more relentless than anticipated. One of her priestesses knelt. The glyph tower has fallen. The humans are deep into the sanctum. We cannot hold them. Mary's green eyes narrowed. She touched the pillar. Then we will no longer try to hold this place, she whispered. We will bury it. Another priestess gasped. You mean to? Yes, Mary said. Her voice was quiet, almost reverent. Awaken the old ones. The ice worms awaken. The sigils on the obsidian pillar flared to life with blinding white light. Across the glacier, deep underground, ancient magical circuits began to pulse. They spread like a web. Lines of dormant runes long thought to be decorative suddenly cracked open the ice. And then the first ice worm stirred. It was more serpent than worm. Its translucent, crystalline hide shimmered with layers of protective frost, scales thicker than tank armor. At over 100 meters in length, it coiled through the frozen earth, blind but sensing vibrations, magic, and life. The humans had walked into its nest. More tremors. Then a roar, a deep, ancient scream of awakening that shattered the sky. From the ridgelines to the collapsed temple basements, the ground buckled. Steel-clad mech stumbled. Structures cracked. The glacier itself heaved. Something's moving, Zhao barked. Her red mech sensors showed something enormous tunneling toward them. Multiple contacts. No, not tunneling. They're displacing the entire glacier. We're under attack, Arjun said quietly, locking his green mech stabilizers. Retreat to higher ground, immediately. But it was already too late. The ice beneath Petrov's Russian contingent exploded as a titanic ice worm burst forth, flinging debris and mech parts like confetti. A blue titan was swallowed whole, screaming pilots silenced in seconds. Petrov swore and unloaded his entire autocannon into the beast's face. The plasma rounds exploded harmlessly against the ice worm's armor. The creature hissed and slammed its body against the remaining titans, smashing one to pieces. Fall back, Briggs yelled. All units, full retreat. Phase 2 is compromised. The battlefield had become a graveyard. From every direction, more ice worms emerged. Some twisted from beneath the melting fortress. Others surged into the sea, breaking the land itself apart. The entire elven base, once proud, ancient, and sacred, began to collapse under the monstrous weight of its forgotten protectors. Mary stood silently at the fortress command balcony, watching her own sanctuary crumble. One of her lieutenants spoke hesitantly. We will be buried as well if we stay. I know, Mary said. Her gaze lingered a moment longer, then she turned. Gather the divine artifacts. All of them. We retreat to the fallback base, Narita Island, off the northeast of Australia. This place is lost. The Sun Knights nodded grimly. They had fought hard, bled harder, but this was no longer a battle they could win. Earth forces in retreat. The remaining Earth mechs raced across crumbling ice. Behind them, ice worms thrashed and coiled, shattering the ancient foundations of the elven base. Zhao status, Briggs shouted, dodging a burst of falling debris. Sniper teams wiped out, one railgun intact. Evacuating now. Petrov, half of my men gone, the Russian growled. I'm holding until last team clears. Negative, Arjun's voice cut in. I'm initiating fallback barrier. Everyone pull out now, or you won't make it. Green energy flickered across the battlefield as Arjun's team activated their last-ditch defense, an energy field reinforced by rune arrays designed for wide-area containment. It wasn't strong enough to kill the worms, but it might delay them. As the last mechs cleared the glacial rift, Arjun stayed behind a moment longer, his mech surrounded by the dome. One of the ice worms turned its head toward him, sensing the pulsing magic of his barrier. Arjun didn't flinch. Do your worst, he muttered, and then launched the final surge, the shield detonating in a radiant burst that blinded the creature long enough for his escape. Moments later, the entire elven island base collapsed, vanishing into a maelstrom of ice, snow, and worm-ravaged stone. Aftermath and fallout. Hours later, on board the Pacific Coalition carrier, the commanders stood together for their debrief. On the central holomap, the red marker labeled Elven Base blinked once, then turned black. Destroyed. Casualty reports still coming in, Zhao said, her uniform streaked with oil and dried blood. Over 60% losses. Engineering and medical crews nearly wiped out. Many of our best Titans are gone, Petrov grunted. But the worms, they are not dead. They've spread into the sea. Arjun nodded grimly. They're migratory now, drawn to heat, magic movement. Coastal cities will be vulnerable. Briggs didn't smile. So we won. We took the base and unleashed something worse. No one disagreed. A few moments of silence followed, filled only by the low hum of engines and distant chatter from medics attending survivors. Then Arjun turned to the others. We need a new plan. These creatures aren't bound by elven control anymore. And Mary is still out there with the divine artifacts. Petrov folded his arms. She'll strike again. Zhao's eyes narrowed. And next time, it won't be defense. She'll come to us. Briggs finally spoke again, voice like a blade. Then we meet her there, Narita Island. After we finish this. Epilogue. Mary's resolve. Far away, under a burning sun on Narita Island, Mary stood before a new command altar. Her armor had been repaired, and the divine artifacts, half a dozen glowing relics, floated around her in slow orbit. Behind her, her remaining forces constructed a new fortress, this time shaped not like ancient temples, but as bunkers of elven design fused with scavenged human tech. One of her lieutenants approached. The worms have begun migrating into warmer waters. Coastal radar is detecting them. Let them come, Mary said softly. Let them see what their victory has cost them. Her eyes rose to the southern sky. This war is not over. The fire spreads. The Watcher in the depths. Far beneath the waves, in the aftermath of the shattered elven fortress, humanity's sonar buoys and underwater drones tracked movement unlike anything ever recorded. The ice worms, now unbound and instinct-driven, surged through the ocean. Colossal, ancient beings of magic and frost, they churned the sea, dragging entire icebergs in their wake, and occasionally breaching the surface like ghostly leviathans. Naval ships kept their distance. After witnessing one such creature wrap around and crush a cruiser during the collapse, no one dared provoke them yet. On board the INS Vikramatya, Admiral Ravi Prakash stood at the bridge, scanning the horizon through binoculars. Any contact from the Australian station? Negative, sir. The worms have destroyed the relay towers in Quadrant 7. Send recon drones. I want eyes in the Coral Sea. If those things reach populated waters, we'll be facing a crisis worse than the elves. And yet, despite the panic, Antarctica was free. Its skies belonged to Earth. The steel tide had retreated battered, but victorious. Now, the world turned its gaze outward, to the seas, to the skies, and to other elven strongholds not yet broken. Mary's POV, Elven Retreat Base, Coral Trench Chain, Australia. Mary limped into the sanctum beneath the Coral Chain archipelago, her silver armor cracked, her shoulder bleeding freely. Behind her, elven knights dragged crates of glowing blue crystals and the artifact itself, a chunk of the moonlight core, still pulsing with divine energy. Tyrion approached, half-panicked. The worms. I know, Mary rasped. They've broken free. Then we must destroy the artifact. Mary turned sharply, grabbing his throat with ice-cold fingers. This is our last key to the goddess. I will not destroy her gift. She released him, stepping back toward the altar. We'll harness it, redirect the magic. The worms serve Luna. They were bound before, and they will be bound again. Tyrion's eyes widened. You're going to command them? Mary gave a savage smile. I'm going to finish what the queen began. Outside, The seas boiled as one of the ice worms surfaced briefly near the island, its massive fins cleaving the waves before vanishing into the abyss. Africa front, Diana's fire. In Mozambique, the war still burned. Elven hover ships passed over scorched earth and collapsed resistance bunkers. The aristocrats of the firehouses continued their scorched earth march, but new data flowed into Diana's hands, lighting up her battle screen. Multiple ice worm signatures, some heading toward Madagascar, others curling around the Horn of Africa. Diana frowned. Those are supposed to be dead relics. Velthyra spoke gravely. They're not dead, and they're moving toward us. Diana hissed through her teeth. Alara's pet priestess woke them. She's playing with fire. Velthyra nodded. And we are now sitting on the oil fields. Diana looked out across the savannah. Begin contingency evacuations. If the worms make landfall, we fall back to the Rift Mountains. South America front, the jungle trembles. Deep in the Amazon, Valen Thorn stood on a vine-carved dais, watching her dominion through arcane scryers. Cities had fallen. Rivers were under elven control. But her peace was shattered by an urgent call. My lady, the humans have deployed naval drones off the eastern coast. I expected that, Valen replied lazily. No, the neutralist mage said. They're not hunting us. They're tracking something else. She waved her hand, revealing sonar footage of a colossal serpentine shadow, swimming north toward the Atlantic coast of Brazil. An ice worm. Valen turned pale. Not just one, 3. And they're accelerating. Even the trees around her shivered. Forestia, Queen Alara's silence. In the moonlight citadel, Queen Alara sat in a silent throne room, watching the stars flicker out. The worms have risen, she whispered. The lunar pool beside her pulsed once, dimly. The goddess no longer responded. You've taken your silence too far, Alara murmured. They do not fear you anymore. They fear her. She rose slowly, fingers dragging across a map of Earth. Antarctica gone, Asia rising, the oceans trembling. Then let them fear Mary. Epilogue Global Alert Status. Red. Antarctica. Fortress lost, artifacts stolen. Humans regroup and fortify. No active elven presence. Coral Islands. Mary escapes with the divine artifact. Royal Knights, severely weakened, but protected by sea magic and worm proximity. Indian Ocean and Pacific. Iceworms migrating toward warmer coasts. Estimated impact within days to weeks. Africa. Mozambique. Diana holds territory, but prepares fallback options due to worm threat. South America. Valen tightens grip, but senses something unnatural stirring in the deep jungle and the coasts. Forestia. Alara watches silently. War is no longer in her control. Arrival. The wind howled across the refugee camp, pitched on the cliffs overlooking the stormy waters of southern Mozambique. Aluna used to live in Beira, a bustling port city that once sang with the rhythm of trade, music, and the scent of spices from distant lands. She had been studying to become a marine biologist, her days filled with lectures, shoreline surveys, and laughter with her friends by the water. But that life had shattered the moment the elven portals opened over Africa. Beira had burned, swept by fire magic and shattered by enchanted beasts. Her parents were gone, lost in the first wave of chaos, and now she cared for her younger brother, scavenging what little aid made it past the broken supply lines. Each day in the refugee camp was a test of endurance, securing food, dodging sickness, avoiding the attention of desperate or dangerous souls. That morning it started like any other: gray skies, ration lines, whispered rumors of more skirmishes in the north. But then the sea changed. Aluna had paused on a cliffside overlook just to steal a breath of air beyond the smoke and sweat. That's when she saw it, the ocean's surface buckling unnaturally, as if something ancient stirred below. Out in the churning sea, the surface began to boil and rise, not with waves, but with movement. From the depths, a monstrous form breached the water. A glistening, translucent creature longer than a city block, its body crowned with jagged, icicle-like spines. It let out a low, rumbling cry that vibrated through the earth itself. Then another emerged, then another. Dozens of them. Ice worms, their massive bodies glittering with frost under the African sun, were writhing toward the coastline. Aluna could feel the sudden drop in temperature, the salt water in the air turning to mist as frost curled along the edges of the camp. Ice worms, beasts whispered about in horror broadcasts, were migrating north, drawn from the polar ruins by the warming waters and human activity. The air grew cold, unnaturally so, as frost kissed the rocks around her feet. She pulled her brother close, trembling as the creatures loomed like leviathans of another world. The ice worms had arrived, and this time, no army followed. Just nature twisted by magic, answering the call of a war that had torn the world apart. Opening, a storm from the south. The city of Quelimane, Mozambique, had once been known for its lazy riverside charm, coconut palms swaying in the tropical breeze, and small boats fishing the Indian Ocean just beyond the delta. Now it was a war zone, not of missiles and fire, at least not yet, but of temperature and terror. Offshore, the ocean had turned slate gray. Winds howled with unnatural fury. Ice bloomed across the beachheads like a creeping curse, coating palm trees in frost. From the sea, they came, not in fleets or armadas, but from the deep. Ice worms. One surfaced with a shriek that shattered windows across the waterfront. Its crystalline spines scraped the sky, casting shadows over the rooftops. Civilians fled inland, while drones buzzed overhead, trying in vain to track the dozens more swimming toward Africa's warm shores. The war had left Antarctica. Now it had come home. Commander Asha Okonkwo, Mobile Defense Zone Zulu. Commander Asha Okonkwo stood atop a sandbagged mobile command post near the outskirts of Quelimane, armored in exo-combat gear with the Nigerian 3rd Coastal Division insignia on her shoulder. Her eyes narrowed at the blue thermal map flickering across the hollow display before her. "How many?" she asked, her voice gravel. 17 confirmed signatures, her aide replied. 3 nearing beachfall. 1 is massive, almost 200 meters long. Asha's lips tightened. "Pull all armor units back to the concrete zones. We don't fight that thing on the sand. It'll eat tanks for breakfast." Her radio buzzed. "This is Bravo 9. We have contact. Christ's." Static. Then a gut-wrenching roar echoed in the distance, followed by the thunderclap of a collapsing building. Asha looked up. In the hazy distance, ice spears erupted from the earth, skewering defense towers like toys. "Give me the matches," she ordered. "All of them. Full cold weather loadout. We buy time for evac, or we die on this line." Jamie Lancaster, field scientist, Luna-class analyst. In a reinforced mobile lab behind the 2nd defense line, Jamie Lancaster with a flurry of motion. Screens showed spectrographic data, magical energy resonance, and heat maps from satellite scans. Her white lab coat was half-zipped over tactical gear, her hands gloved and trembling from the cold seeping through the ground. "Solomon, that thing has a heat signature 20 degrees below freezing, and it's in motion. Ice magic is intensifying the deeper it goes," she said into her comms. "Can you stop it?" came the rough reply of Solomon Kane. Jamie grimaced. "No, but I think someone's trying to control them." She pulled up a frequency spectrum. Faint pulses, magical, rhythmic, almost like a call, emanated from multiple directions. 3 different sets, 3 different signatures. They're responding to signals from 3 locations. Someone's trying to command them. And I'll bet my career it's the elves. Solomon's voice dropped into a growl. "Let me guess. Mary, Diana, and Valen." Jamie nodded grimly. "All factions, probably racing each other to turn the worms into weapons." Outside, the ground shook. Alarm screamed. One of the ice worms breached the outskirts. Its icy breath flashed freezing trees into statues of white crystal. Solomon Kane, Wormslayer. Solomon Kane didn't wait for orders. He leapt from the evac carrier and landed in the snow-slushed road with a thud, trench coat fluttering behind him, rifle in hand, and a belt of arcane grenades clinking at his side. His silver implants flickered under the skin, enhanced senses locked onto the giant serpent rearing over the city blocks. It was beautiful in a monstrous way. Eyes like glacial stars, a body ringed with jagged ice that shimmered in the sun. He took a breath, centered himself, and moved. Buildings blurred past. He darted through abandoned streets, up ruined scaffolding, over rooftops. Then he jumped. The grenade hit the worm's side and detonated in a sphere of fire and anti-magic. The beast screamed, flinched, but turned its fury toward him. Perfect. Solomon ran. The worm followed. Behind him, missile batteries locked on. Now, he shouted over comms. The sky lit up with guided missiles and railgun bursts. A dozen warheads hammered the ice worm's side, cracking its icy armor. It writhed, smashing a stadium to rubble, then collapsed into the street, twitching. Solomon landed hard on a rooftop, breathing heavily. One down, he muttered. Only dozens to go. Mary, royal faction. From a cloaked shrine ship orbiting above the Coral Sea, Mary watched through her moonstone scryglass as ice worms rampaged across the Mozambique coast. Beautiful, aren't they? She whispered. A lunar priestess stood beside her. They resist your call, High Lady. The artifact amplifies our magic, but something pulls them elsewhere. Mary narrowed her eyes. Valen and Diana, always reaching beyond their station. She turned toward the moonlight core floating in its crystal cradle. Begin to write. Let the goddess's voice be heard. These beasts were ours before time, remembered. I will not let mongrels tame them. She raised her hand, chanting. Lunar runes ignited across the artifact. Energy spiraled into the sky, rippling through the ether toward the ice-covered beasts across the world. Diana, aristocrat faction. In a scorched forward command dome on the edge of the Great Rift Valley, Diana scowled. The iceworms were not listening. Her army, the proud light and fire-wielding nobility of the aristocrat clans, stood restless. Her mages burned incense, drew binding circles, invoked the ancient names. Nothing. Too many voices are calling, said Velthyra beside her. The worms are confused. They are not confused. They are rebellious, Diana snapped. Alera's priestess broke the seals without preparing the chains. Typical royal arrogance. She studied a map of Earth. The worms were splitting. Some toward Brazil, some toward the Arabian Sea, others looping back toward Australia. Send word to our human comrades in New Mombasa. If we cannot command the beasts, we must intercept those who can. She narrowed her eyes at the data stream. And tell our scouts, bring me the location of Mary's shrine. Valen Thorn, neutralist faction. Valen Thorn, the queen of the jungle and mistress of balance, stood atop a living balcony. Her fortress nestled in the roots of a massive tree in the heart of Amazonia. She held a jade staff glowing faintly, tuned to the pulse of Earth's magic. The ice worms answered her. Faintly, hesitantly, but they heard her call. We will not control them, she told her acolytes. But we can guide them. She tapped her staff into the floor. Vines responded, blooming with magical flowers. The worms would follow life or death. Send offerings to the coasts. Let the worms come. And when they do, show the humans we are not their enemies. Civilian POV, Southern Africa. In a shattered church repurposed as a shelter, Lekin, a young teenager, huddled beside his mother. Outside, a worm's screech echoed through the city. The roof trembled. People prayed. Others wept. The air was bitter with frost. And yet, in a corner, an old radio buzzed. Coordinated counteroffensive ongoing. Solomon Kane confirmed alive. Scientific teams led by Jamie Lancaster suggest elven interference. Lekin didn't understand much about politics or ancient beasts, but he saw the look in his mother's eyes. Hope, flickering like a candle in the storm. And sometimes a candle was enough. Epilogue, Echoes of Power. Global Situation Update. Mozambique and East Africa. Human forces launch counteroffensives. One iceworm down by Kane and mech teams. More incoming. Civilian evacuation continues. Coral Sea. Mary's Shrine begins activating ancient lunar magic. Worms in the Pacific responding faintly. Arabian coast. Worm signatures approaching. Diana prepares to intercept Mary's influence. Amazon jungle. Valen begins spiritual guidance rituals, aiming for coexistence. Orbit. Earth satellites detect growing energy surge in the Pacific. Unknown consequences. Opening. The Cold War heats up. The skies above the Indian Ocean had never borne so much steel. Aircraft carriers, destroyers, and drone barges, many still steaming with the frost of Antarctica, cut through the waves toward the eastern African coastline. Their hulls bore the marks of the frozen war, burns from magic blasts, gouges from elven glaives, and paint half peeled by the bitter winds of the southern pole. But they were not broken. They were victorious. Above them, human squadrons flew in synchronized patterns, casting wide radar nets to search for signs of ice worm emergence. What had once seemed like nightmares from another world now had designated code names, heat signatures, and threat levels. The war against the unknown was becoming organized, but deep beneath the waves, something ancient stirred. And above them, in orbit, the divine eye opened. Commander Asha Okonkwo, the relentless push. Commander Asha Okonkwo stood aboard the bridge of the INS Vikrant II, sweat on her brow despite the chill in the air. The air reeked of oil, disinfectant, and tension. Mozambique's coast was behind them now, but they weren't retreating, they were hunting. A holomap showed their path northward along the African coast, tracking a massive ice worm signature that had fled into the deep. ETA to predicted surfacing point? She asked. 17 minutes. Sub-zero thermals are converging on the Tanzanian trench line. Deploy anti-submersible drones. Full net. This thing won't vanish again. The humans had learned. They adapted. And this time, they had come prepared, with newly modified depth charges laced with anti-magic disruptors and mech suits built to endure magical cold. This time, they would not merely survive. They would win. Jamie Lancaster, the architect of resistance. In the science bay of the USS Athena, Jamie Lancaster adjusted the sensors while tapping into 3 separate encrypted satellites. Her fingers moved with mechanical precision, the glow from the screens dancing across her features. The triangulation is complete, she said over the comms to Asha. Mary's divine artifact is broadcasting at a harmonic frequency that synchronizes with the ice worm's neural pulses. It's not just communication, it's direct neural override. Solomon's voice crackled through the feed. So, she's puppeteering them? Jamie nodded grimly. Yes, and she's aiming them at both us and Diana's forward base in Mombasa. She's using the divine artifact as a control node. Asha's voice came back, cool and focused. How do we stop it? Jamie hesitated. Short term, we break line of sight or overload the worm's magic receptors. Long term, she looked up toward the orbital signature of Mary's shrine ship. We kill the signal at the source. Solomon Kane, the worm's lair, returns. Solomon Kane stepped out of the drop pod into the blazing Tanzanian sun, the sand crunching under his armored boots. His face was partially obscured beneath a reinforced combat mask, eyes scanning the horizon through infrared lenses. The worm's trail was obvious. Where it had passed, the land was scarred. Frozen rivers, shattered stone, entire villages entombed in ice. Beside him, 4 Arclight mechs landed, their pilots saluting him silently. Each was equipped with new cryo-disruption weaponry, courtesy of Jamie's enhancements. Eyes up, Solomon muttered, unslinging his custom rifle. This bastard isn't alone. A tremor shook the ground. Then another, and then the sand cracked. An enormous head burst from beneath, jaws lined with crystalline fangs, eyes glowing with lunar light. Mary's controlled beast had arrived. The battle began. Mary, the voice of the moon, from her crystalline shrine ship floating above the coral sea, High Lady Mary stood before the divine artifact. The moonlight core, its silvery aura casting divine shadows across the chamber. The ice worm on the Tanzanian front roared in obedience, sweeping through tanks and mechs like a scythe through crops. Asha's advanced forces fell back in organized patterns, trying to avoid full rout. Mary watched in silence. You cannot deny the will of the goddess, she whispered. A priestess beside her trembled. High lady, another worm is resisting. One in the Red Sea. It's responding to another faction. Mary's eyes narrowed. Diana. Her voice turned cold. Let the Tanzanian worm continue its purge. Then send another toward Mombasa. If Diana wants control, let her earn it with blood. Diana. Fire Mombasa. In the reinforced dome at the edge of New Mombasa, Diana stared through a magical viewport at the chaos brewing along the Kenyan coast. Mary's worm had changed course. Toward her. Launch the Tempest wards, she ordered, and deploy the Skyburners. I want that thing ash by dawn. Velthira, beside her, hesitated. Do we risk such power so close to the city? If we don't, there will be no city left to risk, Diana snapped. She turned to her battle mages, their golden robes flaring with arcane energy. Prepare the storm invocation. I want to rip the worm's control away from Mary's filthy relic. Her voice dropped to a hiss. She always thought herself divine. We'll see how divine her bones look under the dirt. Valen Thorn, the calm between chaos. Deep in the Amazon, Valen Thorn remained still. The ice worms were restless. She could feel it. Not fear, but confusion. Mary's control was too strong, unnatural. They resisted her with all the fury of untamed beasts. Valen knelt at her garden altar and whispered to the land. I do not command you, she said softly, but if you wish to be free, help me unchain you. Around her, flowers bloomed in the snow. The jungle responded, and one of the worms, slipping away from the Atlantic current, turned away from Mary, away from Diana, toward South America. Human victory. Antarctica. Fleet returns. The global South Atlantic Fleet, fresh from their decisive blow against the elves in Antarctica, returned to a world transformed. No longer were they unsure, reactive, desperate. These soldiers were hardened, tested, triumphant. As they refueled in Cape Town and Dakar, they were immediately deployed again, this time as iceworm hunters. From the skies, they struck the monsters with synchronized air-to-surface railguns. From beneath, submarines with depth disruptor torpedoes hit iceworms as they tried to dive. For once, the battle leaned toward humanity. One by one, worms fell. Their frozen husks became landmarks, and hope began to spread. Civilian Perspective, Cape Town broadcast. On every civilian terminal, radio, and emergency channel, the following message played in dozens of languages. In shelters, relief rippled like wind across a pond. Soldiers were cheered in the streets. Children painted pictures of mech suits smashing through icy monsters. For the first time in weeks, the tide was turning. Solomon versus Mary's controlled worm. Climax, Mbeya. As the ice worm Mary controlled coiled around the ruins of Mbeya, Solomon Kane and his Arclight squad launched a final gambit. Lancaster, he growled into comms. Are we ready? Jamie's voice came through, triggering psychic feedback loop now. Pray it fries her signal instead of our brains. A sonic blast, laced with anti-magic tones, pierced the air. The worm reared, shrieking, spasming. Mary, in her shrine, gasped as the control feed buckled. Her priestesses clutched their heads. What is this? Solomon leapt from his mech, landed on the worm's frozen flank, and planted a pulse bomb directly into its spine. It detonated in a burst of fire, ice, and smoke. The beast collapsed. Mary staggered, bleeding from her nose. The moonlight core dimmed, flickering. Her grip was slipping. Epilogue, the storm ahead. Global Situation Report. Mozambique and Tanzania. One controlled worm destroyed by Solomon Kane's unit. Human losses light. Morale high. Kenya. Mombasa Diana's forces preparing massive counterspell against incoming worm. Civilian evacuations underway. South Atlantic. Human fleet continues successful worm suppression ops. South America. Unaffiliated worm approaching Brazilian rainforest. Valen's followers spread guidance rituals. Coral Sea. Orbit Mary's shrine flickering. Artifact power damaged, but still dangerous. Status. Conflict escalating. Elven factions fractured. Humanity holding ground. The world breathes, but not yet safely. The ice war is far from over.